Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my cat who was missing for 11 years has been found, but they won't give him back. In 2012, my family and I moved to Oklahoma with our cat, Shadow, who was almost 5 years old at the time. Unfortunately, he got out of the house one day and never returned. For 2 long years, I searched endlessly, holding on to hope that someone would find him since he was microchipped, but nothing ever came up. By the 3rd year, I reluctantly accepted that he might have passed on, and we mourned his loss. Even after all this time, we still talk about how much we loved him and missed him. Last year, we moved back to my hometown, and recently we faced a devastating tornado. Although our house was fine, the financial burden was challenging since we only get paid once a month on the 1st. We had to replace over $500 worth of groceries we had already purchased for the month, as well as other necessities to make our house comfortable again. Then, out of the blue, a vet's office called to inform me that they had found Shadow. It turns out that he had been living on a residential street for the past 6 years, surviving with the kindness of the neighborhood people who fed him. He had no regular vet visits, no cozy bed, and no protection from the weather except sporadic help from compassionate souls. Recently, he got into some trouble, was injured, and needed minor care and stitches, which is when they discovered his microchip with my contact information. I was ecstatic to hear the news and couldn't wait to reunite with my sweet boy. However, due to our financial situation, I couldn't make the trip until August 1st. The woman who found him initially agreed to wait, but unfortunately, she started hesitating and wasn't sure what to do with him during his recovery. We both scrambled to find funds to arrange the trip, and thankfully, the bill was lower than expected. Even my parents chipped in from their emergency fund to help me retrieve Shadow. But then, heartbreakingly, I was told that another couple in the neighborhood had taken him in, and they already grew attached to him and their kids loved him so much that they decided to keep him. Since then, I haven't heard anything from them, and I don't even know where they live, except for the town. So now my kids and I have to go through the mourning process all over again. It's devastating, and emotionally, this loss will stay with me forever. We love you, Shadow, and miss you dearly, and I'm so sorry that we won't be able to see you. Edit. I spoke with the vet's office this morning at 9:30, and they're contacting R to request that she bring Shadow back so I can pick him up. They also made it clear that R cannot rehome my cat, and he is legally mine under Oklahoma law. They were incredibly apologetic about the whole situation, and I've been advised to file a police report since R admitted that he never went to the vet during the years he lived in the neighborhood and was brought in as a stray without a home. Hopefully, I'll hear back soon. Update. After a long day of waiting, I just got off the phone with the animal hospital. R has agreed to return Shadow to them so I can pick him up tomorrow. The police report will stand until I have Shadow back in my possession. If everything goes as promised, I'll have my baby boy back tomorrow. Update. I received a call first thing this morning from the animal hospital, and Shadow is now finally home. He's responding to his name, playing, coming up for pets, purring up a storm, and exploring the house. Although he looks a bit rough, he's settling in wonderfully. We're letting him take his time to adjust, and he will never be allowed outside again. Last update. He's eaten, explored the house, purred, and played. Now it's bedtime, and after such a long day, he deserves a good rest. Usually Reddit makes me lose faith in humanity, but that one, that made me feel so good. I cheated on my wife, and now she's about to find out. My affair partner got served divorce papers out of nowhere 2 days ago at work. Her husband knows about us. It's only a matter of time before my wife finds out. Don't know if I have days or hours before the world as I know it is gone. Took some time off work today to spend time with my wife and our 2 daughters. My body is in turmoil, but strangely, my mind is clear. It reminds me of the days leading up to my dad's passing. Time has slowed down, and I'm aware of all the things surrounding me. It's a nice feeling. My day today was filled with observation of details and appreciation. My wife's smell and the clothes she wears, my daughter's laughter, the color of the kitchen tiles, the dog in the yard. I feel blessed to have a healthy and beautiful family. What will my daughters think of me? I look at my wife that I love with all my heart, and I see a woman who stood by me no matter what. We had our fair share of ups and downs like most couples, but I never imagined a life without her. How do I justify a 6-year affair? Is that even forgivable? I don't know what the future holds. All I know is that the storm is coming, and I'm here basking in the sun until the clouds come rolling in. I plan to confess over the weekend. Even if I know the outcome, I pray she does not leave me. This was so not worth it. Any suggestions on how to confess? How do you start? What do I tell my daughters? I've already made an appointment with a therapist. What else can I do? Wish me luck. Edit. Yesterday I reached out to my brother for advice. He left his wife some years ago and married his affair partner. He seemed happy with her. The grass is not greener for him after all, and he's planning on leaving her, but he's stuck at the moment. His advice is to not tell my wife and to minimize if confronted. He also said that I should let down affair partner gently so she doesn't go nuclear on my wife and family. I'm hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. Not trying to be mean or anything, but you never imagined life without her? You had a 6-year affair and you love your wife with all your heart? It sounds like you're really confused. OP. I'm not confused. Never was. I don't have a problem separating love from hooking up. My heart is loyal to my woman, and she is it for me. 6 years is a long affair by any measure. If it wasn't worth it, what was a affair partner to you? Someone you could also mess around with along with your wife? For the record, this is the classic definition of throwing someone under the bus to save yourself. Maybe start by owning up to what you've done. If you think the affair partner's husband will reach out to your wife and tell her everything he discovered, I would suggest you start telling the truth. Whether your long-term affair is forgivable or not is no longer in your control. OP. So many responses about how I don't value my affair partner. Well, since I'm pouring out my heart here, let me tell you about my affair partner. She's gorgeous and a smart woman who is funny and open to different experiences. She's younger than myself and my wife. She's fit and she's beautiful. But she's not my wife and does not even compare. 6 years on and off is a long time to invest. As I see it, she's an adult who made her own decision to cheat with a married man on her husband for whatever reasons. Do I care for her? Yes, 6 years is a long time. Do I love her? No. Did I say to her that I loved her? Yes, of course I did. But I lied, just like I lied to my wife. Did I use her? Yes, I did. Did she use me too? Of course she did. We both knew we were playing with fire. You're selfish. 6-year affair, and it was only not worth it because you and affair partner were caught. Not only do you not deserve your wife, but you do not deserve your affair partner. Update. I was prepared for all scenarios, but not this one. The doomsday did not come in the shape I was expecting. Affair partner convinced her soon-to-be ex to not spill the beans to my wife in exchange for a smooth divorce. I thought I was in the clear. Yesterday, affair partner sent me a blurry photo of my wife in the car with another man. She claimed they walked hand in hand to his car from a store in a nearby town to ours. She got a shot of the plates too. After some digging, I now know that she's having an affair. Don't know how long for sure, but at least for 6 months. He's a single dad, our age, and is telling her to leave the marriage. She's telling him that she loves him. I'm afraid to confront her. I feel numb at this point. Took a day off of work. Any advice on how to proceed? Should I just let it run its course and monitor? Should I confront and hope for the best? Should I confess to my affair and hope that we can all come clean and make way for a new marriage? I'm so utterly confused. I have rehearsed the things that I would say and do if she were to find out about my affairs. I was not prepared for this. I think you need to find out why your wife cheated. If her reasons line up with yours, maybe there's a way for you to move to don't ask, don't tell. OP. I'm desperate to talk this out, to know why this happened and how invested she really is with this jerk. If she's doing this out of revenge, maybe I have a chance, because if so, she does feel something for me at least. I can't imagine her being emotionless, throwing away over 20 years. I know this woman like I know myself. Deep down, she's hurt, but also so very stubborn and proud. I just want to know if she knew about my affair, why didn't she confront me? I would have chosen her over affair partner in a nanosecond. And what is she hoping to find with this guy? He's no better than me, hooking up with a married woman. I'm trying to respect her wish to have some space, but I'm desperate to just talk to her. Update. My marriage seems to be over. Confronted my wife this past weekend, set her down without warning, and told her I knew she was having an affair, and with whom. Asked her if she loved him and what her plan was. She was caught off guard, went to the bathroom for 10 minutes. When she came out, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, I know about your affair too. I've known for some time now. I love him and I want a divorce. Next days were a blur. I tried talking to her, but she just shuts me down. She has moved into the spare bedroom and is making appointments with law firms. Has told our 2 daughters. I have signed up for emergency therapy. I'm on meds for dealing with anxiety and a lack of sleep. This is surreal. Heard her talk to him last night and cut the internet cord. Kind of crazy because I need internet for work and she just switched to her phone. Oh man, so many emotions are running through me. How did this happen? How can she not feel any emotion? Over 20 years gone. All the love, friendship, partnership, intimacy, jokes, memories, plans for our future, gone. Just like that. No looking back. I feel so blindsided, and the only person I can talk to is my brother who lives across the country. Sorry to vent to you here. Just needed to get this out. Would I be the jerk if I told my wife I would fire her? Married for 16 years. We met in college, both employed and students, and married before graduating. She became pregnant. I dropped out to work full-time. She continued until around 7 months pregnant. We agreed she would take care of the kids and be a stay-at-home mom until the kids were old enough to go to school during the day. She's been back to school 4 times for different things each time and has worked maybe 1 year of the 16 years we've been married. Our youngest has been in school for the past 6 years. I've supported everything she wanted to do. She had multiple MLMs, craft making, and business ventures with friends over this time period, and she doesn't stay with any of them for more than a year at most. During this same time period, I've upgraded jobs multiple times, finished my bachelor's, and obtained a master's. I went from working barely above minimum wage security to working in tech, making over $130,000 a year. I never stopped supporting her or being there for my family. I remember taking a group meeting conference call for a course's team project on Google Hangout while I was at Disney World with the family. The first career jump I had, I went from working a double shift security job to driving 6 hours away to an interview, thinking I was late, but I was actually early because it was in a different time zone. While I've been doing everything I can to build us up, I feel like she's been doing nothing but drag us down. She always says she's going to get a job, but she does nothing at home either. She's supposed to be taking classes now to be a teacher, but she doesn't do anything on her schoolwork. I've put up with a lot of this over the years, and I think what finally set me off was she opened up a letter from the state we live in talking about teachers' retirement plans. She subbed maybe 3 times in the last year, and I guess they had her in their system for that. She turned to me and said, "Can you help me figure out what I should do for my retirement plan?" I burst out laughing, like legit laughing. I've never used language like this with her in my life, but I couldn't help it, and I was like, "You have to have a dang job before you can retire." She just looked at me shocked. I kept laughing. She said that it wasn't funny, but to me, that was the funniest thing I had ever heard. In the end, I want to know if I would be the jerk if I sat her down and we had a conversation that went like this. Imagine we both worked full-time and made enough money that we could have a live-in nanny housekeeper chef. I know that'd probably cost a lot, but that'd be pretty cool, right? Now imagine after you got home every day, you had someone like that. Someone that said that that was their job and you agreed that's what they'd do since that was their job. And the house still looked the same, dirty place as it is now. And instead of cooking foods, they just put some dino nuggets in the air fryer every day. We'd probably fire them, right? Gentle, everyone sucks here. First, I think you've made a mistake letting it go for this long. It sounds as though your trust in her is poisoned, and there's a lot of resentment there. I think this contributes to your understandable laughter. Even in print, it sounded contemptuous and rude. Secondly, she's selfish and unfair to let you work to support her and the family without being a true partner to you. You do need to talk, and I guess I can see how your question is reasonable, but I think it's very inflammatory and likely to escalate rather than create useful discussion. What do you actually want here? Do you want her to make an income or be a better stay-at-home mom and homemaker? I think you should aim for the former, as she doesn't sound like she's thriving as a homemaker. Some people just aren't cut out for it. Can you apologize for being rude? Begin by saying you've been thinking more about retirement since her question, and realize that her staying at home is a luxury you can't afford if you want long-term financial stability and adequate savings. Then suggest she get any part-time job that she can. Doesn't matter what, just get back into the workforce while she finds her career. Say you'll be supportive, etc., but that the family cannot afford MLM and entrepreneur stuff, and she needs a traditional part-time job while sorting things out. Am I the jerk for eating my meal indoors in comfort since my father-in-law was in my patio chair? I, 36 male, am a big guy, 6'8" and 398 pounds, 203 centimeters, 180 kilograms. My father-in-law is also a big guy, 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, 182 centimeters and 90 kilograms. Because of my size, I can't sit in a regular plastic patio chair. My father built me a custom chair for a gift when I was 18. I love that thing. It even has my initials carved into it. It's sturdy and ridiculously large. Whenever we have people over to the house, it's very obvious which chair is meant for me. I have an oversized folding chair that is nowhere near as comfortable, but it allows me to at least be social. I can have a beer in it, but eating is a terrible idea. We had family over this weekend. Normally, if someone sits in my chair when I'm grilling, my wife will ask them to pick a different seat, but she can't stand up to her dad. He decided that since he's a big guy, he deserves the big chair. And my wife chose not to remind him that that's the only chair I can sit in without breaking it or hurting myself. When I was done grilling, I came over and asked if I could please have my chair so I could join everyone. He said he was comfortable and that he wasn't going to move. Rather than start a stupid argument, I just served myself my food and went into my office to eat. Because of the work that I do, my office is soundproof and locked, and it's in the basement and it locks as well. I could lose my job and be criminally liable if some of the information I deal with wasn't properly compartmentalized. Once everyone figured out that I had just left to find a comfortable space to eat, they all started bugging him to move since he was literally in the only spot I could sit and there were plenty of other seats. My wife tried to get me to come back, but my phone was upstairs and I was enjoying my peace and quiet. I ate quickly and came out as soon as I was done, but the damage was already done. My father-in-law was embarrassed by everyone except my wife for sitting in my spot. He was very red when he apologized for taking it. I said no problem and sat to socialize with everyone. My wife said that I behaved poorly and caused her father to be yelled at by her mom, and that even my kids told him that he shouldn't be sitting in my chair. I would have eaten in the kitchen upstairs, but it was full of food and people. We don't eat in the living room. I guess I could have eaten in our bedroom, but I have a perfectly acceptable place to eat downstairs. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You did everything right. You asked him to move, he refused. You didn't freak out, you ate someplace else. Your father-in-law was a jerk, and he's embarrassed that everyone noticed. My ex's girlfriend expects me to take her kids for a weekend. Background info. My ex is not actually my ex. We've been separated for 9 years now, but we've never actually signed papers for numerous reasons, financial being the biggest one. We've co-parented our son well for those years, and for the past 8 years, we've included my boyfriend in the process. We've been doing quite well at this, and the three of us have established a pretty good relationship. 2 years ago, however, my ex got a new girlfriend. Her and I don't get along, mainly on her part. And no, I don't just say this because it's my side. I've always encouraged my son to respect her and try to get along with her, but he just can't stand her or her 2 daughters. I don't mind her youngest. She's hyper and bounces off the wall, but she's 8, so it's to be expected. The oldest one, who's 11, the same age as my son, she's a jerk. She actively ridicules and belittles her sister, my son, and my daughter, who's 6. She's rude to me, my ex-in-laws, and even my ex. This girl is absolutely out of control. Background out of the way. So last weekend was my son's weekend at his father's. However, my ex and his girlfriend have been invited to a party. My ex and I were discussing it when he dropped my son off on Wednesday, and he mentioned that it might be easier if we switched weekends around, but he wasn't sure if he could find a babysitter for the 2 girls, so we had to wait and see. I was fine with that and told him to just keep me informed. Later that night, his girlfriend sent me a message saying that since I was taking my son for the weekend, number 1, I could just take the 2 girls and keep them for the weekend too. Before I could even respond to this, she added that she would send them over clothes and some money so we could get pizza. I told her that I wouldn't be taking her girls, that I wasn't taking my son for the weekend, that he lives with me, and his father and I were just switching weekends around, and I certainly wasn't taking her kids for the weekend. She sent a message back saying it was very rude of me not to take her girls since she took my son every other weekend. Before I could respond again, she sent another message saying she'd send over $15 for a pizza. I told her that she didn't take my son on the weekends, that my son spent the weekends with his father, and reiterated again that I wouldn't be taking hers. She responded asking what I was doing that I couldn't take the girls. I told her we weren't doing anything. We were just going to have a nice relaxing weekend. She asked why I would ruin her and my ex's weekend by not taking her daughters. By this point, I was annoyed, and I told her that I didn't like her oldest daughter, and she was a brat, and she wasn't allowed in my home outside of emergency situations. She responded by saying that I was an awful person and a terrible mother, and I didn't deserve to have my kids since I clearly didn't understand parents who just need a break. I ended up blocking her, but wow. Edit. I don't know where the girl's biological dad is. Ex-girlfriend is from the West Coast, we live on the East Coast, and I've never felt it's in my place to ask. She doesn't end up raising my son on the weekends. My ex knows our son isn't a fan, so they typically go fishing, camping, or hiking. My ex loves our son and spends as much time with him as possible. I took screenshots of our conversation, and I plan on talking to my ex when he picks up our son on Wednesday. I currently haven't heard from either of them, so I guess we'll see if she tries to drop them off tonight at 6. Edit 2. So I just got off the phone with my ex, who called to ask when I had agreed to take the kids, since last he knew that wasn't happening. I sent him screenshots of the conversation, explained that I had never agreed to take her daughters, and told him that I was quite clear with her on that. He said he was sorry and that he'd handle it, and that I'd see him on Wednesday when he picks our son up. Update. The night in question, when she had wanted to drop her kids off, my ex called me at 5 p.m., an hour before the usual pick-up or drop-off time for my son. He asked if I had agreed to take the 2 girls, since he knew I wasn't overly fond of having them over, but girlfriend had said yes. I told him that I quite clearly told her no, in no uncertain terms, and told him to check his email, and that I'd emailed him screenshots of the conversation. He sounded upset and told me he apologized and he had discussed it with her and see our son next weekend. He picked our son up yesterday for a few hours and apologized again, and told girlfriend that she was not allowed to contact me unless it was an emergency, and she was never to ask me to babysit again. I told him I understood. It wasn't anything on him, and left it at that. If you charge my card, I'm calling my bank to tell them it's fraud. In my 7+ years of working customer service, I don't think I've ever encountered a person as entitled, snobby, and downright arrogant as this lady was. Right from check-in, this lady was on a warpath to, what I would assume, project her clearly miserable life onto almost every staff member. To begin, her credit card was declining, so obviously our property system wouldn't allow the check-in. After being asked for a different credit card, she took offense and immediately blamed front desk. I have money on my card. Clearly you don't. This was a lengthy and painful 15-minute process of trying to explain her card is declining and her idiotically trying to blame us. She finally provided a new credit card with the attitude of a 3-year-old mid-temper tantrum. To add, she kept mentioning she's part of a wedding group. I guess she thought she was entitled to royalty treatment because of this. Throughout the weekend, she had numerous complaints and demands. To summarize, this is what we dealt with. Demanded towels at her door every morning. Mentioned multiple times, staff had very unprofessional work ethics because we wouldn't bend over backwards for her every demand. Hated the furniture in the hotel. Complained breakfast room wasn't open 10 minutes before the stated time. She talked down to our housekeeping staff, was very snippy and rude about towels, garbage, and fresh linen. Hotel air quality was worse than a farm. I kid you not, those were her exact words. It felt like she had something to say about everything. Nothing made her happy. It was a giant headache all weekend for the entire staff. However, her final act before leaving our property is the cherry on top. As I'm checking her out of the system, I confirm the credit card on file is the one I'm charging. She replies, no, this hotel is horrible. I'm not paying. The fan was way too loud in my room. I laugh to myself that she snuck in another complaint right before leaving. I respond, I'm sorry you feel that way. I could speak with my GM for a possible discount. In utter disgust, she looks at me and goes, no, you're not charging it at all. If you do, I'm calling my bank to tell them it's fraud. She rolls her eyes, swipes up her luggage in a Hulk-like rage, and storms out of the hotel. I called my GM right after to explain what had just happened. My GM just goes, yeah, charge her the full amount. She stayed an entire weekend. She's not getting anything for free. Why do people suck? Am I the jerk for banning my little cousin from my room? I, female 20, have a Barbie doll collection. I've been collecting them for my entire life. I have over 30 collectible and limited dolls, all still in box in perfect condition. They're on display in my room. My parents invite my little cousins over quite a bit, and of course, they come in my room sometimes to look at the dolls. I don't mind. They know not to touch. One of my cousins, let's call her Anna, who's 12, seemed particularly interested in my dolls. She was asking me which ones were my favorite, most valuable, ones I had the longest, etc. I was showing her my favorite one, One that I got it when I was a kid, and it's worth about $500. It's my favorite doll. After I finished telling her about it, we left my room and we all went downstairs to chill. I noticed all my cousins were playing except for Anna, who had disappeared sometime while everyone else was still playing. I didn't think much of it, just thought she was in the bathroom or outside playing. But after about 15 minutes, I got suspicious and went upstairs to my room. There was Anna, playing with my $500 Barbie doll. She not only opened it, but completely destroyed the box in the process. My heart dropped. I lost it. I screamed at her and told her she was never allowed in my room again. She started crying, saying she didn't know she couldn't play with it, but that's a lie. I always tell them to look, not touch. It also felt suspicious she opened the one doll I told her was the most important to me. When my aunt came back to pick my cousins up, Anna ran to her saying I yelled at her for playing with my toys and banned her from my room. My aunt was furious with me and demanded that I apologize to Anna. I refused and told my aunt she owed me a new doll. My aunt told me no doll should be worth $500 and she will not replace it. My family is divided over this. Some are on my side, but some say that I can't expect my aunt to pay $500 for another doll. So, am I the jerk? Small update. I've decided to send this thread to the family group chat, along with proof of what the doll is worth. As some people have pointed out, the doll is actually worth nearly $1,000. I think I'll be able to get more family on my side, and hopefully my aunt will read it too and see that she is wrong. Small update too. After sending this thread to my family group chat, I have everyone on my side. They understand that this isn't just a toy, but something of real value. Still, no word with my aunt, but I am hopeful my family will be able to influence her to replace the doll without having to go to court. Also, some of you seem to think I just had the doll laying around and was waving it in front of her, teasing her that she couldn't play with it. That wasn't the case. I've had this collection since I was a baby, so the dolls are no secret to anyone in my family. She also doesn't play with dolls, never has. The way she ripped the box excessively makes me near 100% sure that this was done on purpose. Tell your aunt to pay, or you'll let a small claims court decide, not the jerk. This. Plus, buy a lock for your door and no longer let any of them in your room unsupervised. Set up a camera too. This kid is way too old for this behavior, and you should definitely sue over the price to replace it because you can never be sure you'll get a proper replacement for list price plus all the emotional investment. File the claim, and any flack you get should be met with, what kind of parent raises a kid to the age of 12 that doesn't understand not to touch or destroy other people's valuables? I have collectibles, and this hits home. I wouldn't bother with threats at this point. I'd rather go right to filing a lawsuit of around $1,000 or so and go from there. Not the jerk. I'd even threaten to take your aunt to small claims court. Your cousin is old enough to know fully well what she was doing. Buying a replacement is the least your aunt can do. She can't truly make up for the fact all of your efforts over the years of you treasuring and keeping that doll pristine and untouched have been deliberately trashed. The cousin even went out of her way to find out and target the doll most precious to you. If you don't fight to make them recognize the importance of your doll and the gravity of what your cousin has done, no one else will. $500 from their pocket to yours only goes part way to teaching them the lesson. Your cousin should be punished on top of that, but you only have control over access to you and your room from now on to levy that yourself. Taking the work news to the news. I'm still unsure if it's really compliance, but my ex-employer announced some news regarding our jobs. It was obviously false, but instead of calling the BS, I treated it exactly as I would have if it was true, and it bounced back in their face. It was a while ago when I was working in a community-based organization. We provided end-of-the-line shelter for people and did rights advocacy in a medium town, about 100,000 people. The salary was low but okay, but most employees were there because they believed in what we did. The main problem was the manager. She didn't act accordingly to the set of values the organization was based on. She was grossly overpaid compared to employees, took everything personal, made sure we were cut off from the administrators, and created an atmosphere where people feared retribution. We were unionized, but after a few months, I realized no one was ever filing complaints, even for trivial matters, because they feared she was going to lash back at them. Turns out she had done it to a few people in the past. Once I figured I wasn't going to stay there much longer, I decided to sign all of the complaints I could. According to union, I could sign anything I witnessed, even if I wasn't the target, and figured I would see them to the end and leave. That way, administrators could claim not knowing, and there was a chance for my colleagues to have a better work environment. So, of course, the next few months were horrible. She picked on me regularly. Still, most people sided with me, at least privately, most of them fearing she would do the same treatment to them if they declared it publicly. One morning, she calls a staff meeting and explains that a large amount of complaints have been filed in the last months, looks at me, and the cost to settle them or to pay the lawyers to fight them might bankrupt the organization, and everyone is thus at risk of losing their job soon. Insert ominous music. Panic ensues. My colleagues are crying. They're calling their significant others. A lot of people are begging me to take them back, stating she got the lesson. Some of them are genuinely upset at me. In my opinion, it was obviously BS made to turn them against me. I mean, the sole emergency housing of a 100,000 people city, annually filled at 115% capacity, would be closing for a dozen complaints where I'm not even asking for money in any form, over legal fees which are usually budgeted in advance? Come on, it's basic fear brewing schemes. Normally, I would have questioned it during the meeting or tried to reason with them afterwards, but that time, I decided to comply with the narrative and treat it as true. I left for my break and did what I would have done if we were really closing, appealing to the public outrage to help us fulfill our mission. I called the news, told them verbatim the morning announcement, the service hole it would create in the community, the job impact it would have in the city, etc. The local news picked it up. They called the manager and administrators about running the story, questioning how come there were enough complaints to threaten a 35-year-old pillar of the community services, asking what the complaints were about, etc. Before 4 p.m. that same day, we had another meeting to explain that we must have misunderstood the first meeting, as the organization was in no way, shape, or form in danger of closing. Sure, we must have misunderstood. Moral of the story: let those who brewed the trouble drink it. Karen server refuses to refund my tip. I went into a burrito bowl place to order takeout. They had this new tip option on the card reader that they've never had before. The card reader is not touchscreen, nor are there tabs on the side to select options. They're just numbers. Before I paid, the screen asked what amount I wanted to tip: 20%, 25, 30, or other. I tried to press the number 4 for other, but the button didn't work. I told the worker that number 4 did not work and asked the worker what to press for other, and she told me 3. After I selected 3, it added a 30% tip to my card. I told her I wanted to select other and not 30%. She told me she was not aware that I was not trying to tip, and she thought she remembered the order number. I asked her to refund my tip, and she said that's not possible since they can only refund actual orders if there's something wrong with the food. I told her the card reader buttons were not working properly, and it doesn't have an easy or obvious option to select no, nor did the right option work. She refused to refund me, saying, "It wasn't that much money anyway." I asked to speak to the manager, telling the manager they need a more user-friendly option to select no on the card reader, and the manager told me all the card readers are like that, which it's not. Other places have a no option and are touchscreen. She told me my tip would be really appreciated and it would help her staff since the holidays are coming up, and this could be my way to make someone's day. I told her that because they are using a system like this, they don't care about their customers, let alone their coworkers, if they need to even rely on scamming people to get tips, and I want a refund. The manager asked me why I selected a 30% option if I wanted to select other, and I told her the number for other didn't work, and when I asked her worker about it, she told me the wrong answer. She told me I was gullible and blaming her worker for my own mistake, and out of good customer service, she will refund my tip, but told me this will not happen again. You're the jerk. See, this is why I have no problem messing with customers' food. My coworkers and I have to deal with people like you every day, and I can't tell you how infuriating it is. You couldn't just spare a few dollars as a simple thank you to the people who work their butts off making your food? I hope they ban you from their restaurant and that you learn to show a little compassion. Rich boy goes to Chipotle and accidentally leaves a tip, then goes full-on Karen when they aren't able to process a refund for the $2 tip you accidentally gave them. If I worked there, so help me God, you don't even want to know what I'd do to your food. I've been tested a few times like this before, And let's just say, some of the entitled customers like yourself that rubbed me the wrong way got way more than they bargained for. I do chemistry in my spare time as a hobby, and I always have a full kit with me at work for the problematic customers. Heck, I even add some of my secret ingredients to random customers' food when I just don't like the way they look. Dang. Mess around and find out. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the employees? Please let us know. I always tip servers well, and I don't plan on stopping, but I am getting tired of these machines at the gas station that tell you to leave a tip when you're checking out for the chips that you bought. Am I the jerk for being upset that my niece requested payment when I asked her to babysit for a couple of hours? My husband, who's in his 30s, male, and I, 30s, female, we have a 3-year-old son together, Max. Max is a sweet kid, but has a difficult time in unfamiliar situations, and he can get overstimulated easily. A little while ago, my husband was across the country on a work trip while I was home with Max. I got a call one morning from his manager informing me that my husband had been in a car accident and he was in the hospital. He couldn't tell me much, but said that although he was stable, it didn't look good and that I should come as soon as I can. I obviously freaked out. I booked a ticket just for myself because it would be almost impossible to travel with Max, and I could barely afford the last-minute ticket for myself. I called my mom, who lives a few hours away, and asked her to come watch Max while I'm away. At this point, I needed someone to watch Max for the time it would take for my mom to arrive so I could make the flight. Looking back, I probably could have handled the logistics better than this, but I was hysterical and was just doing things as I thought of them. I called 3 friends. 1 didn't answer and 2 were unable to help. Luckily, we live close to my brother and sister-in-law who have a daughter who's 17, Sarah. We're very close with them. Sarah answered the door and said her parents were out. I explained the situation and asked if she had watched Max for a couple of hours until my mom came. I should note that Sarah babysits for a few local families and obviously charges them for her services. We have never asked Sarah to babysit before. She showed some concern for my husband, and when I asked her again, she said something along the lines of, "Well, you'll pay me, right? I usually charge this much." I stared at her for a moment, not really expecting that response, and then my friend who didn't answer called me back and said of course she'd watch Max. So I took Max and left without saying anything to my niece. I coordinated with my friend and my mom, then flew to see my husband. He ended up needing surgery, but is making a full recovery. A few days after he was able to fly home, we had dinner with my brother and sister-in-law. We were talking about the accident, and I mentioned that I had asked Sarah to watch Max. I also noted that I was a little upset that she brought up payment in that moment. My brother was surprised and said he would talk to her as that's not an appropriate reaction. My sister-in-law interjected and said she was proud of Sarah for advocating for herself. She and I argued, and she said that I was entitled for being surprised that Sarah asked for money. To be clear, if I asked Sarah to babysit under normal circumstances, I would absolutely expect to pay her. It was unsettling that Sarah would bring up payment while, for all I knew, my husband might not make it in a hospital on the other side of the country. I think it would have been more empathetic to bring up the topic of payment after I returned and confirm that my husband was okay. My sister-in-law is still being cold with me, and so is my niece. Am I the jerk for getting upset? Not the jerk. It was an emergency, a one-off thing, and the kid is family, for goodness sake. Your niece is sadly lacking in empathy and decency, as is your sister-in-law. I'll bet, had she agreed, you'd have done something nice for her upon your return. Glad your husband will be okay. In my opinion, you are not the jerk, because if you asked Sarah to babysit under normal circumstances, you would absolutely expect to pay her. I would normally be on her side. However, this was clearly a serious family emergency, and the right thing for her to do would be to help, or to ask you later on to compensate her in some more casual manner. Not the jerk. My aunt refused to babysit my brother and I when our dad almost didn't make it. This was 20 years ago. My mom's relationship with her never recovered. Niece needs to learn time and place to advocate for herself. Reddit likes to say we don't owe others anything, but you do. You owe them empathy if you expect to be part of a family unit. No jerks here. Sarah is a teenager, and really, all she did was ask for payment for babysitting. Socially flawless? No, but again, teenager. You were upset and worried and just didn't answer, then went about your business. It may have been awkward or something you didn't like, but in my opinion, there are no jerks here. It sounds to me that Sarah has had bad experiences with other people not paying her. I know hardworking teens who have gone unpaid because they didn't know how to negotiate or set boundaries, and ended up feeling foolish afterwards, especially when it comes to helping relatives. I'm not saying that you wouldn't have paid her, but she had no way of knowing without asking you. She didn't have an empathetic response to your emergency. However, just as you expect empathy for your situation, as the adult, it would be gracious if you overlooked her mistake. What would have been a kind response is to say, of course you would pay, but to privately express to her later that in the emergency situation, you were a little hurt that she wasn't more concerned about your husband as her first reaction. By bringing it up to her parents, you are making it a more awkward situation. My kids are older teens, and they've benefited from relatives giving them the benefit of the doubt, but also pulling them aside and gently speaking to them. And I've done the same with my nieces and nephews. I try to come to them with the assumption that they have good intentions but haven't learned proper etiquette yet. As a result, we have a good relationship. I don't think anyone is the jerk here, just a lot of high emotions and assumptions in a stressful situation. No jerks here, because you were understandably distraught, but gentle reminder, it is your responsibility to find childcare for your kid, even in an emergency, and that includes paying for it when needed. Also, she does this for work, so it makes sense she didn't want to give her services away for free. I know many family members that ask people to fix computers, for instance, that look at theirs for free. Would it have been nice if she did it for free, being that it's an emergency? Sure, but she's not obligated to. You're the jerk. I'm sorry you found yourself in such a terrible and stressful bind, but considering you would have had to pay an emergency sitter if all your contacts had fallen through, I don't think this is as unreasonable an ask as you're trying to argue it is. Although, honestly, this is the part that gets to me. You think it would have been more empathetic to bring up the topic of payment after you returned. You mean after she had already rendered services and couldn't do anything about it if you continued to insist you shouldn't be charged, let alone try to argue, as most people would, she should have said something in advance if that was the expectation. Yeah, no. You didn't want to pay her rates, and fortunately you didn't have to. Move on and drop the shame campaign. I understand that you feel that your niece's reaction was insensitive to your circumstances, but it's not unreasonable to be asked to be paid for labor. Whether you're in crisis or not, you're still asking her to work. In fact, you believing that your emergency entitles you to free labor seems problematic to me. Did you expect the doctors and nurses at your husband's hospital to patch him up for free also? Did you expect the pilot flying you to your husband's side to do so for free? No, you paid them for their services. Why is your niece exempt from that? Gentle, you're the jerk. I understand why you reacted that way in the heat of the moment, but to continue to bear a grudge for a 17-year-old negotiating the terms of a labor agreement is unreasonable. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her niece? Please let us know. Don't you just love the way Reddit flip-flops their opinions? Scam me on my overtime? Cue the long, expensive revenge. This happened in the early 2000s when I joined a startup. We agreed on a salary and no paid overtime and an evaluation in 3 months, and then annually. Standard stuff mostly. It was a very mediocre salary for the work, but I really liked the work itself, which was extremely interesting and challenging. For me, even if the finances were so-so, I felt I'd learn a lot of skills which would be useful in the future. After 3 years, and having 10 decent clients and a bunch of clients trialing and money rolling in, the talk turned to back pay and paid overtime, plus compensating for the past overtime. At that point, around $50,000 in overtime had been accrued, which is a lot. Legally, it couldn't be back pay, so the talk was always of a discretionary bonus. Now at this point, everyone is okay with this, myself included, and this was discussed in writing, via company emails too, so I felt secure that no bad will was in play. I felt the company should be able to afford the payment. Equally, I'd happily settle for equity at a discount, which is legally possible there, if cash flow was an issue. The discussions about back pay, possible equity, had now started to drag on, and I was getting irked by this. In the end, I was made an offer of equity, which meant the company valuation was far beyond anything reasonable, in the hundreds of millions, and I'd get a minuscule stake, less than 0.01% of a company with 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of around 2 million. It was a forget you of sorts to do me out of the money, and I didn't just want to take that lying down. To say I was furious was an understatement. Anyway, the day he made that offer, I handed in my resignation. This sent the CTO into panic mode because the CEO had refused an updated contract and I was still on a 1-month notice period. Plus, I had a lot of untaken paid leave. Basically, it meant I was walking out right then and there. So, off I went that very same day, to the shock and surprise of everyone, I guess. The next day, I sent an official, registered letter requesting my overtime and back pay and received a negative response, which I followed up with another detailed demand. This was also rejected because the bonus was discretionary and there is no overtime. However, I'd been seeking legal advice, and I understood that they don't have a leg to stand on if I'm willing to pay for an attorney. As the liability in such matters is firmly and 100% on the employer, I was willing. You need to understand that going to a lawyer was very rare in these parts back then, so companies didn't generally expect this outcome. Things have changed since then. When going through the applicable laws with the attorney, I noticed there's a limitation of 7 years. So while my attorney was laying out what to do in order to get me my money in as little as a few weeks, I just asked him, what if we wait until it's 6 years and 11 months after the transgression and then file, demanding interest? I wanted this because the law stated that back pay is due at a 9% APR above the base rate, 3.25% at that time, accrued daily for every day past the due date. We're looking at about 12 to 12.5% compound daily APR. The risk is that the company folds in that time, but I decided to take that risk. I sent one final letter stating that I expect all the owed and accrued amounts to date to be paid immediately. Of course, nothing happened. For the next few years, life rolled on. The company did grow and become a known player in the area. When the time came, I found an attorney and started the case. We had copies of all of the communications, copies of the registered letters and responses. The back pay demanded now included interest, which was $112,000. What I didn't know was that in addition to this, that there are fixed penalties for each instruction to perform uncompensated overtime. The total demand was something like $135,000. To say that the CEO, who is still CEO, lost his crap would be an understatement. I got a very nasty phone call, which I dutifully recorded as it wasn't completely unexpected and was added to the filing. The CEO fought, or tried to, but when the judge heard the phone call, he took an immediate dim view. Reading through all of the communication just put more nails in the defense's coffin. The judge just ruled and instructed the company to pay immediately and without delay, and also ordered the company to pay all of my legal costs. They also got a full audit from the Department of Labor. The company paid up 1 week later. To add insult to injury, the evening of the court's decision, the CEO apparently got very drunk and crashed his car into another vehicle while drunk. He got a DUI conviction and lost his driver's license for half a year, and his insurance refused to pay out for the damages to his vehicle, brand new Mercedes S-Class, as he was drunk. All in all, a glorious day. Am I the jerk for pointing out that my brother lives a very privileged life? I'm 45, male. My older brother, who's 51, lives with me. He's never really been good at life. He's had a few jobs here and there, but mostly stuff like Walmart, McDonald's, and he delivered pizzas for about a month. He's never held down a job for more than 60 days. He dropped out of high school and never bothered to get a GED, let alone any college or trade school. He mostly just sits in his room drinking my booze, smoking, and eating my food while he plays whatever Japanese role-playing game he's currently obsessed with. I don't mind this, I truly don't. I did well in life, and my wife invested our money very well, so we're comfortable. I have more than enough resources to support him fully for the rest of our lives, and I intend to do so. He's not taking food out of my kids' mouths. He's not cutting into their college funds. It's literally extra money that I would just be squirreling away if I didn't spend it on him. Last night at dinner, my wife told me that her brother lost his job. He worked for a company that recently had massive layoffs, so it was due to no fault of his own, and asked me if we could float him some cash for bills and stuff while he finds a new job. I told her to have him send me an estimate of how much he needs to cover 6 months, and that was that, or so I thought. My brother proceeded to head over to Facebook and post a rant about how people need to be more self-reliant and not ask for handouts they didn't earn. He didn't mention my brother-in-law by name, but it was pretty clear that was what had triggered his rant. I commented on his post, and I asked him how living off of me for the past 9 years was self-reliant. I told him that he's in an incredibly privileged position because not everyone has a millionaire brother to pay all their bills for them. I also asked how the allowance I give him every week is not a handout. Anyway, a bunch of his friends from his video games started clowning on him in the comments. Apparently, he tells people online that he's an investment banker. He deleted the post and has not come out of his room since. There is an en-suite bathroom, don't worry. My wife says that it was a messed up move for me to call him out publicly like that, and that I could have been more respectful about it. and my aunt is furious with me for airing the family laundry. So I kind of think I might be the jerk here. Not for what I said, but the fact that I had said it publicly. But at the same time, I don't feel like a jerk because his rant was public too. Not the jerk. A prime example of mess around and find out. I'd kick him out to prove a point, honestly. OP. No way I could do that over this. It'd be one thing if he was dangerous, like I'd toss him out in a heartbeat if I felt like we weren't safe with him here. But being a bit of a jerk isn't enough for me to make him go homeless. And that's what I'd essentially be condemning him to. There's nowhere else to go, and he has no skills that could make him enough money to survive. Not the jerk. He decided to do something unnecessary in public. Your aunt seems very fond of him. Will she be taking him in soon? OP. She literally can't. She's in publicly subsidized senior housing. They can't even have overnight guests, let alone move someone else in with them. They'd both end up on the street. Not the jerk, but he got what he deserved. He shouldn't run his mouth like that. The problem is that he doesn't view the wealth you've earned as yours. He views it as ours. You should sit him down and make sure he understands that you take care of him out of the goodness of your heart and that he has no say at all about how you spend your money. You sound very generous with your family, and he can sit down and shut up or make arrangements to come pick him up to go live with her. He's not privileged, he's lucky. Lucky to have your help and support that wasn't earned. Not just lucky, but spoiled. Don't get me wrong, I have to hand it to you and your partner for doing very well for yourselves that you can house him with no issue. You are both extraordinarily generous to have done this. But this dude's past 50. He's seriously got to do something. He can't rely on you forever to give him a way to live like myself, who's still working on it in my 20s. Yeah, I know, the irony. Does he need some sort of medical help? Is it the way his mind operates that's causing this non-action problem? He may need some kind of cognitive therapy or medication so he can focus on whatever he should be doing, be it schooling or working. Anyway, you're not the jerk. He lied to his friends about what he does for some reason. Then he tried to rant because someone else reminds him of himself and you called him out, which isn't a bad thing. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his brother? Please let us know.
Sounds like Uncle messed around and found out.
If you don't want me to take advantage of your grading policy, then you shouldn't have had that policy to begin with. Taking a class. The class is graded on 7 different projects of increasing difficulty, then we have a final at the end. And your projects are worth 60% of your grade and the final is worth 40. The policy is they will drop the lowest project grade to calculate your grade. If the first 6 projects I got 5 perfect scores, 100 out of 100, and my lowest grade was 85 out of 100, this was the first project I had some mistakes, which I learned from. The last project seemed particularly long and annoying, and I'm quite busy with a lot of other things. I emailed the professor to clarify his grading policy, and he tells me I still need to submit something, otherwise the policy won't apply. So I submit my project, and my project is literally just the title of the project, my name, a summary of the project, and that's it. Took me about 5 minutes, if that. I submit. He tells me it's incomplete. I tell him that's the project I'm submitting. He tells me I'm going to get a really bad grade on this project. I say that's fine. I looked at the grading rubric. I should get 5 points. We get 5 points for the name and title. He tells me I'm taking advantage of his grading policy. I tell him it's his grading policy. He tells me he's not going to drop my lowest grade, and instead of having a 97.5 project grade, I'll have an 84.2 project grade. I go to his department chair. I CC him. I highlight the part in the syllabus where it clearly states lowest project grade will be dropped. I also attach the email of him confirming this policy and clearly stating something needs to be submitted to be graded for the policy to qualify. The chair responds and says that the policy outlined in the syllabus needs to be the policy that's followed, and therefore, when it comes time to calculating my final grade, he needs to drop my lowest project grade, which in this case would be a 5% grade. Oh, I already thought about the final and how that might impact his grading of my final, but his final is going to be multiple choice and auto-graded. The malicious part is I obviously submitted subpar work, knowing that the work would get a bad grade, but it wouldn't matter because that grade would be dropped. Professor tried to back out, but department chair told him he needs to honor his grading policy. A few reasons why I did this. Had I done the final project, I would have probably spent 8 to 10 hours working on it. My project grade would have gone from 97.5 to 100, best case, assuming I got 100 on it, and I would have had less time to prepare for my final. If those 8 hours I spent preparing for my final nets me an extra 10% on my final, that's worth more than the max benefit of 2.5% I'd have gotten from doing my final project. Also, that's assuming I'd have gotten 100%. Obviously, anything better than 85 would have improved my grade, but the scale would still be somewhere from 0 to 2.5% improvement. You should have spent 3 hours on the project and assumed that the professor assigns these projects to teach you something, especially if he cares enough to actively go after little jerks trying to misuse his generous grading policy. I assume he's young. Anyone who's been teaching for a while, like the department head, has met 100 smug kids like you. Yeah, unfortunately, this just ruins that class for the rest of them. They'll probably take out their policy, and now every project counts just because they wouldn't put in 1 hour. Yeah, this isn't malicious compliance. This is willful misuse of a goodwill policy. Congratulations on getting away with it, I guess, but it's not in the appropriate spirit of the sub. There was no antagonist until you decided to manifest one. Congratulations, that policy was there to help out students who made a mistake to be able to recover from it. Said policy will not exist in the future, but you really showed him. I usually support the malicious compliance, but this is wrong on so many levels. You took a policy meant to help struggling students and used it to be lazy, and I'm willing to bet you've ruined it for every future student. Stay in a receptionist place? Okay. Context. I worked front desk at an optical store for 2 years. I had no experience and knew nothing about eye health when I started there. Over time, I learned to do contact lens training, how to work the machine for glaucoma testing, visual field testing, how to adjust glasses, and a little bit about sales. There was a fire and we had to relocate, which brought on a lot of stress to boss lady. We'll call her ma'am. We ended up losing our tech who did the contact lens trainings and visual fields, and our lead optician. Being the type of person who doesn't like to see others struggle, I always offered to help whenever I could, especially if the patient was nice. When we reopened, ma'am's husband came to work at the office as a manager, which at the time I thought was nice because I'm sure she needed the extra support. We'll call him Sir. He knew nothing about optical, so he was also training while managing. The problem started on opening day with Sir and I. He wanted to play meditation music and forest sounds. Everyone else wanted general pop and regular music. Since I had access to the speaker, I would adjust it for them. He loved the new space. I missed the old space, but we never spoke bad about the new one. If the office was busy and a pair of glasses needed to be adjusted, I'd offer or be asked to help, and in front of the patient, he'd yell, "Do you know what you're doing?" One time I turned to him and said, "I've been doing it longer than you." I'm sure he didn't like that. We had a meeting where he had no bad comments about my work, but told me I make him want to leave. He would report every word and minor mistake I made to ma'am, and she would send me random texts about them outside of work hours. I never got in trouble for anything, but it was so annoying. Story. On one particular day, I was doing mostly contact lenses trainings, and a patient called about a contact lens being stuck in her eye. These were considered emergencies, so I told her to come in and see the doctor, ma'am. When the patient came in, she looked really uncomfortable and asked how long until she's seen. I offered to take a look until she could see the doctor. When I took her to the back, I tried taking out the lens and couldn't find anything. I told her this, and she looked discouraged. I said to her, "I don't see or feel anything, so you'd be better off waiting for the doctor, and that ain't me." She laughed it off. I told her I'd been doing trainings all day and was hoping to help her and apologized. She said it was okay and sat in the front. Apparently, she went into the room and ma'am told her there were no contacts in her eyes. The patient said that the nurse told her that there's a lens in her eye, and she wanted ma'am to double check. Ma'am was really upset about this because she has to spend extra time explaining to the patient that I was nothing more than a receptionist. When she came out, she made sure to go off on me in front of the patient and my coworkers. I just nodded and apologized. Even after work, she pulled me aside to ask what I said to the patient, and I told her every word. Still, she felt the need to tell me that I make her job harder by misinforming patients. She said I should stay at a receptionist level and not help anyone because it causes trouble. I was shocked by how she spoke down to me and still believed that I told the patient I was a nurse and she had something in her eye. All I could muster up was, "Okay, I'm really sorry about that." After that day, I no longer did contact lens trainings, so now appointments are 4 to 5 weeks out instead of 1. I no longer assisted in visual field tests. I put them all on her schedule. Now we don't have any availability for regular appointments until a month and a half later. I stopped offering to help opticians, so if one person was scheduled, all patients will have to wait for that one person for all adjustments, orders, and dispenses. That one had patients very upset with complaints. If anyone had a question about anything unrelated to front desk, I couldn't help them. Even when she would ask, I just told her I didn't feel comfortable doing anything outside of reception anymore. I eventually quit and now work somewhere with a much higher pay and benefits. They've lost a total of 5 out of 11 employees in the span of 1 year, and I heard 2 more are quitting before the end of the year. Edit. To all the people saying I shouldn't have been doing anything I wasn't certified for, you're right, but that isn't how the business was run. I think people were hired based on past experiences and aspirations, whether or not they were likely to stay long. The only licensed people in that office were the optometrists. The opticians and previous tech were not licensed or certified in any way. They still did trainings, visual fields, started dilations, etc. They cross-trained as many of us as possible to maintain productivity. Am I the jerk for not helping my sister with her wedding because I'm not in the bridal party? My sister and I aren't best friends, but we have a pretty good relationship. Good enough that when she got engaged, I assumed that I would either be maid of honor or at least a bridesmaid. She ended up not asking me despite having a bridal party of 10, but I didn't say anything even though I was a little hurt. I totally get that it's her wedding and that I'm not entitled to be in her wedding party, and eventually I got over it. A little afterwards, my best friend got engaged and asked me to be maid of honor, and I happily dived into the responsibility, and it's been a lot of fun for the both of us. I've already been able to plan and execute a lot that has both made the experience fun for my friend and also a lot less stressful. Onto the issue. My sister's maid of honor honestly dropped the ball. I know I'm going to be biased, but I've received complaints from family members and other friends. She hasn't put any effort into helping my sister with her wedding, didn't plan anything, never responds to my sister's messages, and just generally isn't interested at all. None of my sister's other bridesmaids are stepping up either. They all have a reason for why they can't spend more time on my sister's wedding. My sister recently approached me to plan everything for her: bridal shower, bachelorette, and the actual wedding. She wants me to give her the same experience I've given my friend. I was a little offended because she only asked me after she saw what a great job I did for someone else. But she's my sister, so I told her I'd be willing to help if she made me a bridesmaid. I feel like it's the least she could do, and it would make me feel less like an errand girl and really part of the wedding. She refused and said that I'd make the numbers off and that I didn't have the look she was trying to accomplish, which really offended me. Like, at this point, I'm just ticked off. So I said fine, I don't have to be part of the wedding, but then she needs to hire me as a wedding planner because I'm not doing this for free. It takes a huge time commitment to do all of this work. She went crying to my mom and dad now, and they're all calling me a jerk because I should do it as a sister. But she's basically asking me to do hours of work for free, which I feel like isn't fair. Now my family is saying that I'm ruining her special day by being selfish and making it all about me, so I'm starting to doubt myself. Not the jerk. Unrelated to whether you're a bridesmaid or not, that's too much work to expect, demand, or wheedle out of someone. Let her figure something else out and enjoy not having any responsibility as a guest. Wholly entitled princess, Batman. Your sister refused to give you a spot of honor at her wedding, insulted your look, and then cried to mommy and daddy because you're not helping her? How is she even old enough to get married? No, you are not the jerk. And honestly, at this point, I'd consider not even attending as a guest. My Karen mother-in-law refuses to eat my Thanksgiving cooking. This year, I, 32 female, am hosting Thanksgiving at my house, and I've been working all month on coming up with the menu and testing all my recipes. I'm so excited to share my cooking with my family, and my husband, 35 male, has been super supportive and helpful throughout all of the planning and the prep work. I have bought all of the ingredients, and I have a beautiful variety of dishes planned, both traditional and a few unique additions. Well, today, my husband dropped the bombshell on me that mother-in-law wants to bring her own dinner to eat when she comes over. I asked him why she would need to bring her own food when I will have more than enough here. He just made excuses saying, I know how his mother is, grade A picky eater, and she won't like anything that I've prepared. I thought that was ridiculous. I'm not making anything unfamiliar to her, and there will be plenty to choose from. He argued that her bringing her own dinner would be a good compromise, and I disagreed. It would be hugely obvious that she's making a comment on my cooking, and it would be humiliating to have her there eating something completely different in front of everyone. It's like she's trying to make a point of showing that my cooking isn't good enough for her. I think she's being incredibly rude and disrespectful of the time, money, and labor that I've put into this upcoming meal. I told her if she can't eat anything here, then she's welcome to stay home and eat whatever she wants. My husband is now calling me insensitive and petty. He says I'm ruining the holiday. I don't see it that way. I only want friends and family around who are appreciative and kind. I don't need the negativity of someone rejecting everything I've cooked and insulting my cooking when I've worked so hard. This has truly been a labor of love, and I took on this responsibility to share that love with my family and friends. Am I the jerk for not wanting my mother-in-law to come if she's going to reject everything I've made? Edit. Because people are asking, here's what I plan on serving. First, all of the traditional Thanksgiving foods: roasted turkey, stuffing, classic creamy mashed potatoes, pretty much everything you can think of. How can there not be one thing that she can eat? Update. OMG, there's lots of replies. Thank you all for weighing in. I've been reading your responses and I've been thinking a lot, and as much as it hurts my feelings, I think the get her with kindness route will be the best thing to do. I'm so overwhelmed and exhausted, and I just want to have a perfect Thanksgiving for everyone. I'll let her know she's welcome, and I'll ignore her and focus on my other guests. I won't let her ruin my day, and I'll be the bigger person. That's what family does, as much as I will be irritated on the inside. Who knows, maybe she'll try something and like it, but if she doesn't, that's okay too. Yes, your mother-in-law is being rude and disrespectful, but uninviting her is not the answer. Here's what you do. Welcome her and her special meal with open arms. Get her back with kindness. Be sure to point out to the other guests, in a lovey-dovey way, if perhaps a wee bit patronizing tone of voice, how mother-in-law has special needs and brought her own food, and you are so glad she could make it, even though eating away from home is so difficult for her. Offer to help her heat up her meal. Tell her it looks absolutely delicious, and ask her for the recipes, and ask her if she could bring one of her wonderful dishes to the next gathering. Meanwhile, you and your other guests can enjoy your fabulous meal, and your mother-in-law can listen to all of the compliments you get for it. Not the jerk. This is one of those situations where the mother-in-law thinks she's embarrassing OP, but she's really embarrassing herself. OP, consider how good you will feel as you watch her get more and more uncomfortable eating her special meal. And consider that if you uninvited her with no explanation, you will look like a jerk. If she brings her own food, she will look like an idiot. Everyone sucks here. Mother-in-law is being rude to refuse your food in this way. Your husband isn't being very supportive of you, and you are escalating things unnecessarily. Your cooking, as much as you've dedicated to it, is not the point of this holiday. Time with family is. Your mother-in-law eating her own food won't be humiliating to you, assuming your food tastes at least decent. The only one that will be looked down on for her decision is her. She's the one behaving strangely. Any judgment will be passed on to her, not you. Be the bigger person. Be the classy, generous hostess. Spoil the rest of your guests with delicious food. Make no comment on mother-in-law's behavior and rise above. Also, is it possible that she has a genuine food issue, such as a sensory thing causing her to struggle with foods? Those do exist, and they're not always diagnosed. If so, going to eat at someone else's house can be a terrifying prospect, and bringing her own food allows her to enjoy the holiday with everyone without having the anxiety about if she'll be able to eat anything. I feel like the majority of food issues on Am I the Jerk posts that I read, the comments absolutely back up the OP wanting to bring their own food due to restriction, allergies, or preference. It's often suggested as a way to still go and enjoy without troubling the host to cater to one specific person. So I'm really confused at all the comments against the mother-in-law because OP perceives her actions as a slight. I think it's hard to say who the jerk is without more info backing up why OP thinks mother-in-law is targeting her and also why it matters so much. If she is trying to slight you, her eating the food and complaining about it will not make the holiday more enjoyable for you. It just won't. And that's what you'll be getting if she comes without her own meal. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or mother-in-law? Please let us know.
Alright, all you kids of Reddit, time for a dose of common sense. When you go to someone's house on Thanksgiving, you eat what they make. Got a problem with that? Stay home. Ain't no way I'd allow that Karen mother-in-law to act like that in my house.
Bossy coworker does himself out of a promotion. My first job out of high school was a big deal for me. It was a simple data entry job that I took very seriously. I started moving up very quickly. With so many young entry-level employees, turnaround was high, and I guess sticking around made me stand out. I was soaring in that company. Before I knew it, I was a supervisor over a team. In the department I was in, there was only one other supervisor. We worked very well together and agreed on almost everything. The two of us made a full training for our department, a department policy sheet, and conducted all direct employee contact. Our department was doing so well that our manager was recruited by another department for a much more lucrative role in the company. The new manager was the nicest man alive, but as an outside hire, he didn't know anything about how we ran things. At the same time as he was getting acquainted with us, the other supervisor went on maternity leave. I was the only lead in the department left that really knew what they were doing. It sounds rough, but I blossomed under these circumstances. I helped find our new acting supervisor, whom I'll call Trevor. I went into all meetings with my manager to take notes and help him understand what we were discussing. I hired all of the new staff members, from talking to the recruiter, conducting the interviews, and making the call to offer the position. I was running the show and I loved it. Our new manager was not really grasping things and told me he was thinking about leaving. I was sad to see him go. He then told me that he thought he would ask them to have me backfill his position. This would have been the opportunity of a lifetime. A week later, my manager told me that he talked to the director, but the position wasn't going to go to me. It was going to the acting supervisor, Trevor. Apparently, this guy had been schmoozing while I had been working. I hadn't even been paying attention to him. Trevor had become buddy-buddy with the director by spending all his time in his office and going drinking with him at the driving range. I was heartbroken. I wasn't aiming for the job until my boss suggested it to me. I had gotten my hopes up just to be crushed. I tried to shake it off and get back to work. I oversaw department projects. I had one that required thousands of entries on an Excel sheet. I assigned our staff to the project and did my share. At the end of the day, I had gotten the sheets back from everyone directly under me, but nobody on Trevor's team had emailed me theirs. I went to one of their desks and asked them about the project. The person I asked shyly told me that Trevor told her not to do it. When I asked her why he would say that, she told me he said that I wasn't her boss. I was shocked. This is how we had done every project since we had opened the department. What was he thinking, telling people not to do it? I could explain the small ways that Trevor constantly was trying to undermine me or the almost jealous behavior he displayed toward me, but this story is long enough. I'll just say, while shocking, it wasn't out of character for him. I had always been able to keep him from causing damage in the past, and this didn't need to be any different. Then I realized what a golden opportunity this was. I decided to maliciously comply. I just nodded and thanked her for her help. The next day, the director called the manager and supervisors into his office. He asked me why the project wasn't completed the day before. I shrugged and told him I had sent it out to the team like I always do and had even done a chunk of it myself. I looked at Trevor. The look he gave me, he was pale and looked as if he was about to be sentenced. When Trevor eventually tried to explain that he told the staff under him not to do it, the director asked everyone but Trevor to leave. The project had been related to payroll, and Trevor had royally done over the payroll staff. Our director was livid. He was in there for over an hour. I heard the director raise his voice more than once, which was wild. The doors and offices were glass, so when I passed the office a bit later, I saw Trevor with his head down while our director was shaking his head and moving his hands in a very animated manner. A week later, the other supervisor returned, and Trevor was asked to return to his old position under her. I was offered the position of manager soon after, which I gladly accepted. Am I the jerk for offering 2 different kinds of cake at our wedding? My husband, Josh, who's 29, and I, 27 female, just had our wedding a couple of weeks ago, and we mostly got good feedback until today. We had heard that a lot of people have been smack-talking the cake behind our backs. Josh and I originally were going to have a smaller wedding at a resort. We were fortunate enough to be given some money to invite extra guests, so we decided to expand the wedding and have some of our second cousins and their kids, and some friends that we otherwise don't get to see as often. We're on a budget, so we decided to keep the fancy cake, the cutting cake for the pictures, not the real one, for immediate family, and the pastor and a few members of the wedding party that have known us for the longest. We gave them the cake in boxes to take home though, so they wouldn't be eating it in front of everyone else. Minus the pastor because he flew out from a ways and he's vegan, so he couldn't eat the dinner, and we wanted him to have something to eat before it got too late. We got a couple of sheet cakes. One was vanilla and buttercream with rosettes, and there was another sheet cake of pineapple chocolate chunk, especially for Josh's side of the family, because they spend a lot of time in Florida. Pineapple chocolate chunk? Ugh. We found out from talking with family that there was a lot of full slices left on people's plates of the pineapple cake. Gee, I wonder why. Which the servers would not take home with them, so we noticed you can see it in a lot of the pictures. We were having too much fun to notice at the time. We loved catching up with all of our guests. Apparently, Josh's family did not like the cake like we thought they would, and there have been some unkind words behind our backs. We got a text from Josh's uncle that wasn't meant for us to see, and it really stung. We're unsure where to go from here and what to say. The cake did not go off like we had hoped for, but we think they're being unnecessarily mean. By the way, there was a full dinner, 3 kinds of cheese, even Monterey Jack available, and an open bar that didn't close until late. So I feel like we were pretty good to our guests on a shoestring budget. Not the jerk, but I'm a bit confused as to what Josh's family spending a lot of time in Florida has to do with deciding to have a pineapple chocolate cake. I lived in Florida for almost a decade, and I can tell you with complete confidence that there is zero connotation between Florida and pineapples. I think you're confusing Florida with Hawaii. But beyond that, the combo of pineapple and chocolate just sounds yucky, and I think that's likely what people are speculating on. Honestly, I wouldn't sweat it. Everyone will forget about it shortly, I'm sure. What matters is if you enjoyed your wedding. I don't think the complaints were about you serving sheet cake, which is totally common at weddings, but rather about the flavor combination of chocolate and pineapples. Feels like you made a random choice based on a bizarre assumption of what people eat in Florida. According to my husband, who used to live in Florida, chocolate pineapple is not a Florida thing. Instead of asking the guests you were trying to cater to, and it sounds like you served the pineapple chocolate cake only to Josh's family instead of asking what they wanted. You're not the jerk for having 2 cakes, but if you didn't give guests an option and then got upset when the cake you thought they wanted wasn't eaten, then yes, you're the jerk. Edit. From your comments, it's clear that you decided who got which cake and expected them to trade plates if they weren't happy. So yeah, you're the jerk. You're the jerk. You didn't get a vegan meal for your pastor who flew a long distance to officiate. You openly distributed 3 cakes, which very clearly were of different levels, and chose who got what. You served one side of the family before the other. You assumed that people could trade cake flavors with strangers. You decided that chocolate pineapple would be the best flavor for his family because they've spent time in Florida. What? Honestly, I'd say you're a bad host rather than a jerk because you seem to have meant well, but your planning decisions are inhospitable and indefensible. Chocolate pineapple cake. Ew. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her guests? Please let us know.
Chocolate pineapple cake? I'm sorry, but I think I'm gonna be sick.
Am I the jerk for refusing to go to my wife's deceased husband's family's house for Thanksgiving? I'm 36, male, and my wife, 33, female, lost her first husband several years ago from a brain aneurysm. They had 2 boys together, who are 7 and 6, and I've made my peace with the fact that she will always love him. She even has a sort of shrine to him in our home, and I would never ask her to remove it. We got married only a couple of years ago, and last Thanksgiving, she asked me to come with her to Thanksgiving at her former in-laws' house. Apparently, she's gone to their house for Thanksgiving since her first husband passed. I support this as it's a way for her to stay connected to her first husband's family, and also since it's a way for her 2 kids to maintain a relationship with their father's side of the family. So I went last year. It was a little uncomfortable, but her late husband's family treated me really well. They were very kind and welcoming to me. It wasn't a bad Thanksgiving, but it was still really awkward and I felt very out of place. This year, my wife is trying to get me to go back, but I just want to go have Thanksgiving with my own family. I've invited her along, but also told her that I understand if she doesn't want to go, but that we should be moving forward. But if she doesn't want to, fine, but that she shouldn't try to make me go to Thanksgiving at her late husband's family's home. She's responded that we can have Christmas, Easter, the 4th of July, etc. with either her family or my family, but that she's pledged Thanksgiving to her late husband's family and that I should come with her as her husband to support her. I don't want to. I think it's weird and morbid. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. This isn't just her late husband's family, this is her children's paternal family. Did you think you'd step in and your family would be a substitute? It does not work that way. It's one holiday a year for your stepkids to spend with their father's family. She offered up every other holiday. If you didn't want a connection to that part of the family, you should not have married a widow with kids. You're the jerk. Suck it up for the kids and your wife. You and your new family will all benefit if the kids have healthy relationships with their paternal grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Don't turn down extra sources of love and support for your wife and the kids. You're the jerk. I understand it's not comfortable, but the kids, they're going to want to know the dad they didn't get to know. Yet, the dad they do know is uncomfortable with it. You don't technically owe him or his parents any favors, but you are raising his kids. You're going to be their dad and do all of the things that this other guy and his parents probably dreamed about. If you only see them one day a year, you can use that to learn one thing about this other guy, and you can tell the kids about it on a random day. He's not your competition. You and him are on the same team, and if you can be a part of keeping his memory alive for those kids, even if it's something small, that shrine is going to go away. Not the jerk. This is why you don't marry single moms, bro. Dating is one thing, but to get serious with them is just asking for trouble. And if she's already demanding you go to her ex's parents' house on Thanksgiving, just wait till you see what she'll be demanding from you as the years go on. Also, her having a shrine for him? Bro, she's not ready to move on and be with someone else. Don't know how on earth you allow that in your home. You even admit that she'll always love him. You know that if she could have him back instead of you, she'd pick him in a heartbeat, right? While you spend your money raising his kids. Just know, bro, single moms, not even once. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for canceling my ex-boyfriend's plane ticket, leaving him homeless and unable to get to his family? A brief history. I met my now ex-boyfriend while doing volunteer work. Frankly, he's not been the nicest to me. He's just nice enough, just often enough to have had me convinced that he loved me. It's easier to see in retrospect. A few weeks before this incident, I booked both of us plane tickets to Germany. He needs to go there to stay with his family as he doesn't have anywhere else to live now that his current lease is up. The plan was for him to fly one way and for me to go with him for a short stay, then return home by myself. We were supposed to leave today. Now on to what happened. In between his lease ending and flying abroad, X has been staying at a friend's house in a more rural town, and I was invited to visit while his friend was away. We got to the house, and my ex started making dinner for us. We were joking back and forth, being affectionate, and then in one moment, he flipped. I had gone to hug him when he wanted to peel potatoes, and he just started yelling. I honestly cannot come up with a bigger reason for him losing his temper aside from that hug. It was so out of the blue. And I'll admit, in that moment, I had a panic attack. My distress only served to escalate his anger. He told me to get out and that there was a bus stop down the street, that I'd better hope to get there in time. I gathered my things and left, and thankfully did manage to catch a bus. After that initial period of shock, I realized I could never go back to him. I definitely couldn't go to a foreign country with him. I went to the airline's website to cancel my flights, and there was his booking too. I canceled it in an impulsive, numb moment. I didn't even get a refund because it's an economy airline. A few days ago, he texted me as though nothing had happened, asking for his flight details. I replied that there was no flight, that of course I wasn't going to pay to go to Germany with him after what had happened. He sent a long reply saying I knew he had nowhere else to go, that I knew he was struggling with money, and that I had effectively made him homeless, and he hopes I'm pleased with myself. I honestly didn't know what to say in return, but luckily I haven't heard from him since. I don't know if he's been able to get a flight himself, and a tiny part of me does worry for him. Am I the jerk? P.S. I paid for both our tickets with my own money. We never discussed this explicitly, but I just assumed he would pay me back at some point. Since then, it has become quite clear that that's never going to happen. This may or may not contribute to my am I the jerk verdict. I'm not sure. Not the jerk. You paid for his ticket and had not been reimbursed. He clearly has a friend he's able to stay with temporarily, so now he just needs to start figuring out his way home. Not the jerk. He was a jerk and you don't deserve that. Getting home is officially his problem, not yours. Good for you, knowing your worth. Karen stole my car. I've been with my wife for 4 years. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and she and my wife were never able to form a strong bond, and one of the reasons for that is distance. My wife did try to get close to my daughter in the past, but my daughter claimed she was just attempting to control her rather than have a respectful relationship with her. They had past issues, but now get along a bit. My daughter was visiting for Thanksgiving and brought her Honda car with her. I was out of the house when my wife, whose car had been sitting in the garage for a month now, took my daughter's car keys without her permission while she was showering and left in it for nearly 2 hours. My daughter called me as soon as she got out of the bathroom and was freaking out, saying neither her car or my wife were there. I tried to calm her down as I tried to get a hold of my wife, but she did not respond. We at this point figured my wife took the car, but did not know where she was or when she was coming back. My daughter searched my wife's closet, then called the cops and reported her car taken. She called back to tell me my wife's closet was half empty and cops were called. I got off work and went home immediately, and on the way home, my wife called, crying. She just got picked up by the cops at Walmart and was brought into the station. I went over there and met my daughter there. We discussed what happened, and it turned out my wife took the car to go do some shopping and left my daughter a note in the kitchen to let her know since she doesn't have her number, and took clothes from her closet she packed earlier in the morning for church donations. But my daughter thought she ran away and told the cops that this woman, my wife, ran away with her car. My daughter got her car back, and my wife was let go after filling out a form. I took her home, and that is where she had a fight with my daughter, calling her crazy for calling the cops on her, and a few other things I can't remember. But I told my wife what she did was unacceptable, and she should be grateful my daughter only called the cops in a moment of panic and did not press charges after what she did. My wife was shocked and started crying, saying she couldn't believe I sided with my daughter after she humiliated her and caused her panic and to be involved with the cops like that. I stated she should have not touched the car in the first place, and she defended herself, saying she was getting things done and buying stuff we needed for the house, but we made her out to be the bad guy. She left to her sister's place, saying she had had enough of my daughter's disgraceful and vindictive attitude towards her, and said she'll stay there indefinitely or until I get my priorities straight, because after what happened, she's no longer sure if she is my wife or whether she was treated as such. My wife's car isn't working and has been in the garage for a while now. That is why she took my daughter's car. Not the jerk. She stole a car. I mean, there are consequences to Grand Theft Auto. They even made a video game about it. If she wanted to borrow the car, she needed to ask permission. Skipping that step puts you right in the felony theft category. Everyone sucks here. This whole story makes no sense. Okay, she took her car without asking, which, depending on the family, might not even be that weird. Why did nobody find that note? Why didn't you just wait for her to return? Why the panic? Who the heck goes straight to the closet to make such crazy assumptions that she just left? Who just calls the police on a rational, grown family member over borrowing something without asking once? I would get it if this was repeatedly. This was such an exaggerated chain of events, I cannot follow your thought process at all. I feel like there's a lot missing here and a lot of motives and dynamics that are unspecified. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP's daughter or his wife? Please let us know.
This is why you don't marry a Karen. If I was your daughter, I'd press charges.
I called my brother-in-law pathetic at our family dinner. I, female 24, have a sister, female 32, who has a husband who's 38, who's the poster child of weaponized incompetence. They have 4 kids, who are 10, 8, 5, and 3, and she's pregnant. My sister works a full-time job, over 40 hours a week, cleans her entire house, cooks, takes care of all her kids without him doing anything. It's seriously mind-blowing that she wakes up at like 4 a.m., cooks breakfast, does chores, gets all of her kids ready for school, takes them all to school and daycare, and all he does is stay home and work. And when his kids get home, after my sister picks them up of course, he will play with them for a little and play video games until he falls asleep. She actually makes more than him. My fiance, male 26, and I had to stay with them for 6 weeks while our home was being renovated, and since we both work from home, we helped her, and it's amazing how much happier she is when she has help. I helped with the kids, and my fiance even drove her to the doctor's appointments. Her husband literally only acknowledges he is a parent when his family is around. Then he is a God-fearing, hard-working father of 5. He's the one that wanted more kids. She wanted to stop after her last baby, but he needed more boys. I'm seriously concerned, not only for her, but her kids as well, because now her oldest is seeing what's happening and trying to help, but my sister is prideful and refuses to let her kid do anything. Me and this man have never gotten along. He's been acting like this since their 8-year-old was born. I've tried talking to her about leaving, but she doesn't want her kids to grow up in a broken home. And unfortunately, her experience with our parents' divorce was completely different than mine, so she doesn't understand that a divorce would benefit her kids here because she thinks they need their mom and dad together. Cut to this past weekend. Her and her husband threw a pre-Thanksgiving potluck where our entire family, plus his, was there. I stayed with my sister a few days before because I knew he wouldn't help. So we're at dinner, all talking, and I mention we are trying for a baby, and my brother-in-law makes an offhanded comment to him about how hard fatherhood is, and I snapped and said, "Like you would know." He looked taken aback and asked me what I meant, and I unloaded on him, calling him a pathetic excuse for a man who makes my 8 months pregnant sister do everything for their family. I went off for a solid 10 minutes, and he sat there shrinking in his seat. I left. Last night, my sister called me and thanked me for standing up for her and told me she appreciated me. Although today I got a very nasty text from him telling me I'm a terrible person, and because I lied in front of his family, his mom is angry at him and is moving in with them to help her out, and I've made him the laughingstock of his family. He certainly thinks so, but am I the jerk for doing this? Not the jerk. Not even a justified jerk, as some comments suggest. You had a breaking point, and he was taking credit for the kid's upbringing that your sister single-handedly should be thanked for. He knows he's in the wrong, which is why he sat quietly and kept pretending in front of his family. He would have driven your sister into an early grave. His true colors are bound to come out sooner or later when his mother has moved in. He will not be able to pull the facade forever. When that happens, he will either have to change properly or risk losing the support of his family. All of it is starting with you speaking up for your sister against his lies. Well done. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk for calling out her brother-in-law or not? Please let us know.
That guy sounds even more worthless than you, Reddit boy.
Am I the jerk for making my cousin angry at her husband for not getting her pregnancy cravings for her? I've had a lot of weird and oddly specific pregnancy cravings. So far, my husband has gotten me every single one without fail. A few days ago, my cousin, who is also pregnant, and her husband were visiting. While they were here, I got this random craving for these brownies I had from a bakery in France. I mentioned it to my cousin and her husband because I wanted to know if she was also having these oddly specific cravings. She told me she did, and it was horrible because her husband almost never got them for her. I said that wasn't nice of him, and I would be upset if my husband acted like that. Her husband got defensive and said he actually got her the food she was craving a lot, and that there was a limit to how many times he should be expected to run around after the food she was craving. He kept telling me my husband wouldn't get me my French brownies. We live in Europe, but not France, even though I knew he would, because I've had even more ridiculous cravings before, and he found a way to get them for me. I told him I would ask my husband, since he never believed me, to prove a point, and he was so confident that my husband would say no, which he obviously didn't. The brownies came after several hours, and the longer it was taking, the more arrogant her husband got. So I was very happy when they arrived. My cousin was visibly upset at her husband for the rest of their visit. My cousin's husband asked my husband if he had got them just to prove my point, but my husband said he got them because I said I was craving them, and that French brownies were much easier to get than some of the other cravings I've had. Cousin's husband asked about what other cravings I've had and was upset when he realized I knew I would get the brownies if I asked. Before they left, he called me out on setting him up to look bad and claims his wife is mad at him because of me. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. You basically used your husband as a performance animal to show off in front of your cousin and her husband. It's great that your husband has the ability to keep up with your cravings. Just because someone else may not have the same ability doesn't make them a bad husband or lesser husband. You wanted to brag and show off and caused a fight between your cousin and her husband. Make no mistake, I understand exactly where your husband is coming from. I tried to fulfill all of my wife's cravings both times she was pregnant. I would have been upset with her had she used me as a pawn to try to gloat or make someone else look bad though. Instead of appreciating your husband and his efforts, you use him to show your cousin how much better your husband is than hers. Good for you, I guess. Everyone sucks here. Good lord. The whole lot of you just sound insufferable, except your cousin. Cravings are totally a thing, but what a weird flex for you to prove how terrified your husband is of you to make him leave the country to get some brownies. Not brownies in general, mind you, which would be honestly a reasonable request, but an extremely specific thing that sounds like required momentous effort on his part to satisfy. And for what? So you could make her husband look bad? Granted, it sounds like her husband could be doing more to help her, but you're just way over the top, and I don't get why your husband is on board with this. Not the jerk. To be honest, I would do the same thing. As men themselves will never have to be pregnant, the least they can do is run a few errands here and there. They've basically had it made since the dawn of time. If he's too much of a baby to run to the store for a pregnant woman, I don't know why you'd stay with him, to be honest. And lol at everyone who was triggered by this story. If it legit made you upset, you are literally part of the problem and should seriously check your privilege. My Karen neighbor demands I let her kids play in my yard even after they graffitied my house. My father bought the house in the 80s and held on to it as different developments sprung up around it. I inherited it 3 years ago and have been living in it since. I have 2 acres, while my surrounding neighbors have maybe half an acre if they're lucky. The house is fairly small, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, so I have a very large front and backyard. I use maybe 1/5 of the backyard as a garden, and the rest is basically an empty field. I've always loved kids, so I was happy to let my neighbors' kids play in the field with the understanding that they would respect the property. Most of the kids are great, very respectful, and understand that this is not their yard. The problem is with my neighbors to the right. They have 5 kids, who are 1, 3, 5, 5, and 7, who generally run around unsupervised. They don't come to my yard to play very often unless the other kids are playing soccer or baseball. The 7-year-old is in charge, as much as a 7-year-old can be, but obviously he can't replace parental supervision. 5 days ago, the kids were playing baseball, and he must have lost track of the 5-year-old at some point, because when I came home from work, I found their names sharpied onto my wall, along with some rude drawings. I found their parents the next day and asked them to pay for the paint I'll need to cover it up. They were very offended, accused me of lying, and said they weren't going to pay. If this had been all, I probably would have let it slide and covered the paint since it would only be like $20. But later that day, one of their 5-year-olds decided it would be funny to throw rocks at my house. There are several dents in the siding where the rocks hit, and 2 of my windows are broken. From what I've been quoted to fix, it's about $800 to $900 worth of damage. I talked to the parents, who accused me of doing it myself to make their kids look bad. I've decided those 5 are not allowed to use my yard until the damage is paid for, which I think is more than fair. When they came by this morning to play soccer with the other kids, I politely explained the situation and said they would have to leave as they aren't allowed to play here anymore. The 7-year-old was very upset, more sad than a temper tantrum, which is understandable, but the 5-year-olds were both very angry. About an hour later, their mom came by and went off on me, yelling at my doorstep about how I'm a horrible person who can't stand kids because I'm bitter and can't find a husband. I'm standing my ground either way, but a few other parents came by and seemed a little frustrated by my explanation as to why that family is no longer welcome, which is making me question things. Am I the jerk for banning them from playing here? Edit. To answer some common concerns, I will be installing cameras. I dug my dad's old trail cams out of the garage, so I'll put those up either tonight or tomorrow. I am aware of the liability issues with kids playing in my yard. I'm willing to risk it. I don't want to put up a fence. I think they're ugly. The property line is clearly marked. I will not be banning the entire neighborhood unless I absolutely have to. Edit 2. I also have a meeting scheduled with my attorney to discuss the possibility of drawing up a liability waiver for the parents to sign. Forgot to put that in the last edit. They're also usually unsupervised. Typically, there's a parent or 2 hanging around anyway, and I work from home, so the kids know to knock on my door and ask me to watch them if their parents are busy. I'm also looking into an umbrella policy that would be more likely to cover any injuries that occur. Not the jerk, not one bit. I'm worried that this might escalate and the family will cause further damage to your property out of anger. I'd get some cameras set up if I were you, to protect yourself and so you have definite proof if or when there is a next time. You're the jerk for not calling the police. Are you really just going to pay $800 and not allow them in the yard? How about they pay and they're still not allowed over? And if they come, you call for trespass. You're the jerk. As a mother of 6 myself, our kids need a place to stay and have fun. You can't expect us to take them to the park every single day. Kids are supposed to run around the neighborhood and get in trouble. That's how I grew up, and believe it or not, I turned out just fine. If you live in a neighborhood with other people, like it or not, you're going to have kids running around. You know, being kids. Trust me, no parents like dealing with a grumpy old neighbor who complains about everything that their kids do. If it were up to people like you, my kids would be stuck inside 24/7, being quiet as a mouse. I've had neighbors complain before about just about everything. My kids screaming, leaving trash in their yards, my dogs barking too much, you name it. I tell them the same thing every time. Don't like having neighbors? How about you move out to the middle of nowhere where you belong, since you're unable to deal with living in an actual neighborhood? My kids have been playing outside all day, and the boomer neighbors are sitting on their deck right now. I already know they're going to be calling the HOA again like they always do. What they don't know is that I'm friends with the head of the HOA, and every time we talk, we laugh about him and his BS. Bottom line, if you can't stand living next door to a family, just go live somewhere rural where we won't have to deal with your complaining.
Well, don't you sound like a pleasant neighbor?
Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you let them keep playing in your yard or not? Please let us know.
I'd get a couple of big, mean, hungry dogs is what I'd do. Ruff.
I called the police on my entitled son. For context, I, female 35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was horrible to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mother-in-law ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights, as ours didn't. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge says that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mother-in-law made a huge deal that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment where he was familiar. My ex-mother-in-law has ruined my son, just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted, she's taught him no respect, and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween, and he acted awful. My husband's mom lives with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up, and his attitude started right away because his phone died and the charger I had in the truck didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no, I'd get him one when we got into town, and that next time he needs to remember to bring one for the house and for the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now my youngest was in the back with his tablet playing quietly, and my oldest realized the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger. It won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that. Shut up." Next thing I know, he's forcibly taking the Apple charger and is trying to fit it into his phone. When it didn't work, he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my oldest that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. Older son is still fuming at me because I made him wait, bad-mouthed me to his grandma, etc. I left to go to the office, as did my husband, and my mother-in-law was going to take my youngest son to the treat trail for Halloween. She asked other son if he wanted to go, and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told him not to speak to her like that. I knew trouble was brewing, I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, mother-in-law and younger son went to the treat trail, and older son called mother-in-law to tell her he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl's Jr. My mother-in-law told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get in. Older son told her that she needed to bring it right now. My mother-in-law told him to either eat what was at the house or wait. He lost it on her and hung up on her. Mother-in-law called me, and I told her not to reward his bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out later to eat. He could wait. So when mother-in-law gets home, she tries to open the door and her key won't work. Older son comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening the door or until I came home. My mother-in-law told him to open the door ASAP. She called me crying and I went off. I called older son and told him he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. He really thought I was playing. I left the office and went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and older son was there on the other side. Mother-in-law and younger son had been waiting in her car and older son was blocking threshold, saying that he had told mother-in-law to keep outside, that it was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move now. I tried to push past him and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went to go inside again and he put his hand in my face and pushed me back out. I told him, that's it, I'm calling the police. He didn't think I was serious, but I did it. I told the dispatcher that my older son was refusing to let me into my own home and had put his hands on me. Older son goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. He comes out of the door, screaming and threatening, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she'll send someone ASAP. I mean, I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone. Then he goes after my younger son and starts saying horrible things to him. My mother-in-law locks herself and my younger son in the car as my older son proceeds to kick and punch the car. He even cracked the windows in the window shield. Older son goes after mother-in-law just as my husband pulls up. He's telling mother-in-law this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain older son, and older son is screaming that he will have my husband arrested, etc. The police came, and they immediately restrained older son and put him into the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-mother-in-law had shared custody. So the officer calls ex-mother-in-law and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker, and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and we were mistreating him. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case, as a neighbor had come forward and said she had called 911 also, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. Ex-mother-in-law jumps to saying the police here can't do anything with older son as he's a resident of another state, blah blah blah. The cop tells ex-mother-in-law that's not the case, and it seems like older son needs to learn his lesson. The officer hangs up and ex-mother-in-law immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest, yet thinks she is. If I had older son arrested, that I would be a bad mom and that he was justified in what he had said and done. I asked her about the true son thing, and she said he was my only heir, as he was my first son, and from my first marriage, and divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt others. Long story short, he spent 3 days in jail before a hearing, and the judge asked me what I wanted to do. So older son is being sent to a group home. My ex-mother-in-law fought the entire way, but had no hold because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Now ex-mother-in-law is saying I'm ruining his life and I'm a bad parent. She's also accusing my husband of mistreating him. Okay, so I've noticed a lot of comments saying I abandoned my son, gave him to his paternal grandma, etc. That's not the case. I live in a Commonwealth state with no grandparents' rights, and she had 25 plus years of residency in a state that does have them. When I left her son, my ex-husband, she became furious. In her home state, a grandparent has the right to intervene in the child's life during the parent's divorce, and she used that to her advantage. A judge in her home state granted her visitation with my son, even though he was born in my state. During a visit, she filed for custody and was granted it until the divorce was finalized. The divorce took over 2 years due to my ex not wanting to sign papers and being difficult, so older son was almost 10 when it was finalized. I got something called a change of venue accepted, and the custody case was transferred to my local court, where it should have been there the entire time. Of course, ex-mother-in-law wasn't going to willingly hand him over, so she kept filing appeals, continuances, and other things to prolong the case. It eventually went from family court to circuit court, which is also known as high court for that judge to decide. By this time, older son was at the legal age where he could have a voice in court and was established at school in ex-mother-in-law's area. The judge said that he could finish school there and then be transferred up here for school. My ex-husband had signed his parental rights over to his mom, and the judge had to take that into consideration. He did this to avoid the state going after him for support. The local judge ordered ex-mother-in-law to do therapy as well as older son, and there were issues with them not complying. My ex-mother-in-law ruined her own son. He's in his 30s, won't work, doesn't drive, and expects her to keep him up. I did nothing wrong aside from leaving my horrible ex-husband. The recent psych evaluation said older son lacks empathy for others and has delusions of grandeur, meaning he thinks he's better than others. Ex-mother-in-law also had to do a session, and the therapist said ex-mother-in-law is similar in regards and that her expectations aren't realistic. They both have superiority complexes. My ex-mother-in-law used to lock me out of my own home because she wanted to punish me or limit my contact with my own son. When she took him, I did contact local and state police, but they couldn't go into her state without the permission of officials there, and by then she had filed paperwork. She had nothing to use against me, would not abide by court-set visitation, etc. I have 2 homes, a business, and I'm very self-sufficient. My family life is good, not dysfunctional. We've done everything we can to incorporate my son into our family, but he's refused to accept us. I'm sorry I was a crappy mom for not allowing him to lock me out of my own darn house. Holy cow, you did the right thing. Your son is a threat to everyone in your house, and his grandmother is doing him no favors. Get him the help he needs. Don't abandon him, but don't risk your family's safety. I would be very careful from now on. Your older son will blame you for everything, and your ex-mother-in-law will probably stroke that fire. Set up cameras, and make sure you let the police know when he's released, because with all the rage he displayed, revenge might be on the cards. Also, where is his father in all this? Did he just walk away and let Mummy take over? Your ex-mother-in-law created a psychopath. Way to go, Granny. You really need to think about safety right now. Your son will not be locked up forever. You need cameras and a loud house alarm. Make sure cameras overlook your vehicles. Oh yeah, your 10-year-old is a sweetie. Am I the jerk for saying my boyfriend's roommate can't come to Thanksgiving dinner? Me, 26, female, and my boyfriend, 34, male, have been dating for nearly a year and a half now. Tomorrow, he's coming to Thanksgiving dinner at my dad's house and meeting my family for the first time. I'm extremely family-oriented, and it's so important to me that he's finally meeting them. This also means the world to my family because I rarely bring men home, and they've been wanting to meet him for a long time. He's aware of this and how much this meeting means to me, and has assured me that he's looking forward to it too. This afternoon, he asked if his roommate could come too. I was caught off guard and said no. I didn't even ask my family, who I'm sure would say yes, but it's a hard boundary for me. I barely know his roommate, but he's military and won't be able to be with his own family for the holiday, which is why my boyfriend asked. I understand and appreciate his compassion and kindness, but I need this event to be just him, me, and my family, without his buddy who's a stranger to me. I called him to talk through it, but he's extremely upset and wasn't really responding. I asked if he's still coming, and he said yes. Then I asked if he's okay, and he said no, but that he will be. I told him to reach out to me when he's ready, and that I understand if he doesn't want to talk to me right now, so I haven't heard from him since the phone call a couple of hours ago. I feel like a massive jerk, but this is one of the rare events where I've put my foot down in this relationship and refused to accommodate his wants. So, am I the jerk? Update. For more clarity, and because people are making a lot of unfounded assumptions, I have briefly met his roommate, hi and bye, on multiple occasions. We barely know each other though, because he has a schedule that makes it so he's rarely around when I am, and we've never had the opportunity to have a full conversation surpassing basic greetings. I made it very clear that I'd love to have him and include him in my family, but the first meeting between my parents and boyfriend wasn't the place to do so. My boyfriend has not met my family because I'm very particular about who I bring home and will not bring home someone unless I'm 100% comfortable that this is the correct choice. I'm protective of my family and don't want them to get attached. I get it's unconventional, but it's my choice, and every party involved respects that. I ended up apologizing to my boyfriend, asking my parents, and inviting his roommate, who wasn't aware my boyfriend had asked about him coming. He can't even come anyways. I appreciated the comments, even the ones calling me a heartless monster, but no one is put out in the end. Not the jerk. You're allowed to set whatever boundaries you want, but don't be surprised if, after thinking it over, he decides it's a deal breaker. People in the military often tend to become family to each other, so from his point of view, you're basically telling him he has to leave a brother alone because your heart isn't big enough to include him. He'll probably honor his commitment to your family to attend, but I'll be very surprised if the relationship lasts past this weekend. A. It doesn't say boyfriend is military though. And B, if he were, if the guy is so important to him, maybe he should have introduced him a bit better to his girlfriend. I think no jerks here is a good call. Just don't agree that it should be a deal breaker, or that there should be shade for her heart not being big enough. Edit. Never mind, I saw a comment about them both being military. I still think in this case though, the boyfriend should have made sure she knew him better before springing a last-minute ask like this on her though. OP isn't hosting. If OP was hosting and he asked to invite the roommate, that would be fine. But to ask her family to host a stranger just because boyfriend is invited is odd, especially when OP doesn't know the guy well. Not the jerk. First of all, asking the day before the event is rude in my opinion, especially for something that involves a lot of cooking. If you truly don't know the guy, it's also rude of your boyfriend to want to invite a stranger to your family's house for a holiday. Yes, maybe Thanksgiving is supposed to be about generosity and giving, but I would not be comfortable asking my parents if a stranger can come to our house for Thanksgiving. My dad is military, so I get the whole being away from your family for the holidays. But if the man is in his 30s, it's likely not his first Thanksgiving away from home. And why would he want to spend it with strangers? I don't know. Your boyfriend has the right to be upset about the decision, but you also have the right to say no. It's weird to me. If you knew the guy, then yeah, you'd be the jerk for saying no. But he's almost a stranger, so no thank you. If this was Valentine's Day or your parents' anniversary, I'd understand better. Thanksgiving and Christmas are typically about giving and generosity. I think it would have been better for everyone if you had let the roommate join. I personally think it would have been good to see the boyfriend interact with people he just met along with someone he's comfortable with. On the other hand, now, your boyfriend has seen this side of you and he may not like it. Was it worth the risk of him thinking differently of you? Soft, you're the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her boyfriend? Please let us know. Corporate said so. I used to sling pizza, and I had this one couple who would regularly come in and order a specialty pizza, think meat lovers, but with 3 times the amount of toppings, like extra everything. Plus, they would add extra of other toppings that weren't originally on the pizza, like olives and onions. So of course, this meant that it never cooked thoroughly, even after sending it through the oven twice. Every single time they would complain about the pizza being too burnt on the edges and not cooked enough, and it took too long, and that they also wanted more of the toppings. I tried repeatedly to explain to them that every extra topping you add makes the portion size of all the toppings go down. I don't even understand why we were allowed to add so many toppings on at the register. Anyways, about the 5th or 6th time I replaced the pizza for them, because they kept complaining to corporate and received credit, the man came in again and said they spoke to corporate and corporate wants me to make the pizza the way they want it. I knew that this wasn't true. There really wasn't a corporate customers could call, just a call center, and those people did not care. But I decided I'd do exactly as they asked, but made sure to explain to them that if I made it their way and it didn't turn out well, they wouldn't be getting any more remakes. I took the order and made it as they were expecting. Kind of. I put full portions of each topping on that monster. To say that the pizza was a mountain is an understatement. It didn't even fit in the oven. I had to take toppings off of it. I did feel a little bad at this point, knowing full well they paid, with the store credit, over $40 for this one pizza, and there was no way it would ever cook properly. So I did give it 2 runs through the oven, but that still didn't help. It was pan-to-pan toppings, so getting out of the pan sucked, and I just put it and cut it right in the box so the toppings wouldn't fall everywhere. After I cut it, the slices disappeared under the toppings, and you couldn't even see crust, so it just looks like a giant pile of trash toppings dumped in a box. I couldn't even close it. I brought it to the customer, and he started to lose it on me, saying it took too long, and it looked like a mess, and he wanted another credit. I pulled out his receipt and asked which part wasn't up to par. He said it didn't look cooked, and I reminded him how I warned him that this is what would happen with the amount of toppings we were using. I showed him the crust underneath and went through all of the toppings and the extras. Everything was accounted for as he had asked, so I told him I'd let management and corporate know that it was made to his liking. Never saw them again. Neighbor is big mad about my racetrack. Okay, so it finally happened today. Last spring, my family moved into our dream home. We had bought the property years ago, and through lockdown, finally were able to get our dream home built. The property is essentially in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest neighbor being about a mile down the road. On the few hundred acres we have, I decided to do my best at recreating some professional drift tracks from Driftmaster's European Championship and Formula Drift. We were able to create one-for-one models of Wall, New Jersey, Irwindale, California, Texas, Poland, Seattle, Englishtown, New Jersey. Everything is up to code and greenlit by the county. We plan to open a drift school on the property in the future. We've also built 6 cars to 800 horsepower. I list all this because it is loud and smoky here on the farm a lot, and for the past 7 or 8 months, we've had absolutely no issues, minus a trespasser destroying his car and our shed. Today, that changed. I have some family in town for the holiday, and among them are my cousin, who's 39, and his son, who's 17. Having grown up drifting with my cousin, we were super hyped to take his boy out and slide around the track, so we grabbed a couple of the track cars and cut loose. About 40 minutes into it, and as we were swapping out tires, I hear sirens and step out of the garage. Coming down my driveway are 2 fire engines, a couple of police cars, and an SUV. They all park and hop out, and I ask how I can help them. They ask about a fire along with noise, to which I explain the drift cars and motion to all of the racetrack around the property. I show them my county documents, which allow for the tracks, etc. At this point, my apparent neighbor, male in his 50s, I've never met, starts yelling about the noise and how I should be arrested. The sergeant who had shown up with a gaggle of responders stopped him and informed me that we aren't doing anything illegal, and so as long as we keep our noise to before 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends, we are within the law. Neighbor called us some really not nice names before turning and going off on the sergeant. We specifically chose this property to build on as it's zoned commercial and automotive, on top of residential. The fire department left almost as soon as they arrived. After the neighbor had his meltdown, he was trespassed by the police department. A couple of the police hung around and watched us hit a few laps. I offered to take them out and even teach them if they would like, free of charge. They then left too. I come here to ask Reddit, am I the jerk for building a giant race facility at my home, which is located in the most appropriate area one can find? Update. Neighbor just came back to knock on my door and tell me that we will no longer be racing cars on our property, threatened to destroy the vehicles, and was all but foaming at the mouth. Police came, he called them, and they immediately arrested him for trespassing. This guy is going to be a great neighbor. Ugh. Edit. We do have trail cams all around the property. No one can get in without being seen. There are numerous inside the property too. Thanks for all the concern. Well, I recently bought a little house at the limit of a very small town, and one of the things I cherish there is the silence. But if you decided to open a branch there with all the paperwork done, I just would have to sell and leave. No need to go through the worrying, trespassing, or having a heart attack. It will not change the end result. I mean, if he can hear you, that sucks for him. You don't move to the countryside to listen to cars going around a track. You know, you have the law on your side, but I sympathize with your neighbor. Imagine living far from everything and enjoying your peace and quiet until a new neighbor builds a racetrack. There might be a reason he lives where he does. Maybe he has horses or other animals that get spooked every time you race. I can think of lots of scenarios where a racetrack is highly disturbing for someone who wants silence away from a big city. Have you had any conversations with him at all? Maybe all of this can be resolved if you simply talk to him and try to understand his point of view in all this. You're not alone on this planet, and the sounds and smells you produce reach far beyond your property lines. Yes, it's lawful, but it's also really frustrating when the peace of your home is shattered by someone setting up business in proximity to your home. A home you bought partly due to the peace and quiet. It also tends to decrease the value of neighboring property as they cannot, for example, enjoy their garden without all of the revving. You say it's a mile from your property to your neighbors, but is the track a mile away, or does it come significantly closer to your neighbors since it encircles your land? First, I'm so jealous of your racetrack. If your neighbor wants to sell their home, let me know. I will move to live next door to you. Don't tell my friends because they'll try to outbid me for this house. I can see why your neighbor is mad, although his home is built in an area that is zoned for it. I think people never imagine someone's going to build a racetrack next door. Most people are not aware that the area they live in is zoned for it. That's still not your fault or your problem. If he hates it that much, he'll move and make space for someone like me to move into the area. You need to get louder. Build a monster truck with a huge diesel and massive stacks with whistlers built in. That will really get to him. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his neighbor? Please let us know. I'm probably biased because I can't stand hearing neighbors making noise.
I have some sort of condition where engines revving and kids screaming and bass thumping, it drives me insane and I just can't explain it in words.
Am I the jerk for not standing up for my wife when my uncle made a joke about her? I haven't seen my mom in a year. Last year, there was a big fight between me, my wife, and my mother about how Christmas would work and who would host. My mom decided she didn't want to see me anymore. It sucks, but I'm not going to beg her. My wife and I have a disagreement regarding our 1.5-year-old son. She thinks my mom is a horrible person for not sending him gifts, cards, asking for pictures. I think if my mom actually wants no contact, she's doing the respectful thing. Also, we both agree she wouldn't be allowed to see him, so I don't really get what my wife wants. I've asked her to not badmouth my mom to any of my family. I want to preserve the few relationships I have left, and it's honestly embarrassing. My grandparents gave my mom zero help with me because not their kid, not their problem, and that was with them being fairly close to my mom, so I can't imagine how they would react to hearing my wife's view on this. Recently, we ran into my uncle at my grandparents' house. It was awkward as I know that dude hates me and is 100% on my mom's team, but we were all guilted into staying for lunch. My grandmother was trying to get my uncle to come for Thanksgiving, and he got all upset and said no, she knows he spends all holidays with my mom. My wife then asked how my mom was, and I felt myself cringe. My uncle said she's great. My wife said we wouldn't know, as she never sends any gifts for our son, so maybe she's not okay. I gave her a look, begging her to stop. My uncle's wife burst out laughing. My uncle asked if she was kidding or if she really thought my mom was going to buy gifts for a kid she doesn't even know. My wife went on a rant about how she would do anything to have any amount of contact with our future grandkids. My uncle laughed and said, "Wow, such a gold digger. You put my ex, who I can't stand, to shame." My wife immediately looked like she was going to cry, but I just couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was mortified, and I had begged her to not bring up the gift thing. She asked if I was going to defend her. I said no, and she ran out of the room. We left, and she's furious with me. She says I betrayed her, and my mom is going to laugh when she heard. I told her that she humiliated me, and I'd begged her to stop with the gifts. We all know if his mom did send gifts or request photos, wife would refuse them and probably rant about how horrible his mom is to want access to the kids but not them. Everyone sucks here, not because you didn't defend her, but I have a feeling there's a good reason your mom and uncle want nothing to do with you. I would assume it's more to do with the wife than with him, although I guess it still makes him a jerk to bring a toxic person into his family and let her wreak havoc. Not the jerk. Why is your wife so desperate for gifts from someone she's no contact with? She opened the door to everything that happened after asking about your mom, so she needs to live with it. How exactly does she want you to defend the indefensible? Everyone sucks here because you all sound like awful people. That's really all there is to it. I could try to get into the details, but really, you all suck. Try to bring up your kid to be better. Good luck with that. Karen rips open the doors on my ambulance. Huge mistake. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would actually do this. I'm 30, male, and I'm a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old woman who had fallen at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and she hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? Etc. She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke that she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down the stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling,
"You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids."
My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it, but we were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance flew open, and who did I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What do you think you're doing?" She yells back,
"I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow."
She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says,
"You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke."
My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could hear the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took just a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on the scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these kinds of things. Can't remove the charge? Well, I'll just use it then. In the early 2000s, when I first moved out on my own, I rented from a complex that charged you for assigned parking. It was an upcharge of $25 a month. If you didn't get assigned parking, you would have to fight for a space on the street. My apartment was in the back of the complex, and I was getting over a recent knee and ankle injury, so I opted for paid parking that was relatively close to my front door. My car was a junker, 3 years older than I am, but it ran semi-okay and the heater worked. As a newly minted adult, I was happy to have it. About 3 months into my lease, my car went to the great scrap heap in the sky. I had gotten used to the local transit system and discovered a nearby store would drop off groceries for me. This was long before Walmart and other stores started doing it, so it was cheaper than figuring a month's supplies on the bus. So I opted not to replace the car and utilized the bus pass my work reimbursed me for. I went to my leasing office and told them I no longer needed the space and would you please remove the extra charge from my bill. The manager at the desk was new and had never been asked that before. She promised to look into it and let me know. I was naive and figured it would be gone come next month. Nope, it was still there. I paid all but the parking space and called up the complex. Same girl. She said she was awaiting word from higher-ups and offered me a credit for the charge as a one-time courtesy. I reminded her that I no longer owned a car. I hadn't just changed my mind. I told her that the space had been empty for close to a month now and that I won't be using it. She said she understood, loud and clear, and would get it sorted by next month. 3 days before rent was due, she finally got back to me. Apparently it was in my lease and couldn't be removed without breaking the lease and signing a new one. Even if I didn't move out, the lease breaking and initiation fees would be charged to me, and my rent would go up to the new current market value. This would be over $1,000, so not an option for someone freshly on their own. I kept the parking space on the lease. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my lease to get the phone number for maintenance, and noticed the clause for the parking space. Essentially, I could park a motorcycle, scooter, car, truck, SUV, or trailer in the space. Gears were turning. For me to be in compliance, I had to have wheels on anything parked in my space. So I went to my local version of Craigslist and found a wheeled container similar to a shipping container. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth every cent. The complex offered storage sheds at an upcharge too. Being fresh out of high school, I didn't have much to store. My neighbor, though, did. I threw a lock on the unit and offered it to my neighbor for half the cost of a shed, $35 a month. He was able to move his stuff out of his storage unit, where he was paying over $100 a month, and the container was available 24/7, 365 days a year. He was happy for the arrangement and paid several months in advance. The complex put several tow stickers for out of compliance on the trailer, but I called the tow company and faxed them a copy of the lease where it says trailers are allowed. The container was registered with the county as a utility trailer, so there's nothing they could do. They tried to fine me for improper parking, but again, I had proof I was within my rights. They even offered to remove the charge for parking on my lease if I would relocate the container. With what my neighbor was paying, I could cover my water bill every month, so I declined. I stayed 18 months and sold the trailer to my neighbor when I moved out. He had to rent a car to relocate it to his assigned space, but he said it was worth the couple hundred he paid. He ended up saving over $1,000 a year renting from me. Other neighbors even started bringing in their own containers too, even if it meant getting a second space. Sheds were being vacated at such a large volume, the complex tried to give them away at 6 months free. Few took them up on it. The complex amended the new leases to exclude trailers, but could do nothing about those that had already had them in the spot. Instead of moving out and giving notice, renters would reassign their lease to new people so they could be grandfathered into the trailer clause. I drove by the facility 2 years or so after I moved out, going to a friend's house for Thanksgiving. The complex had been sold to a new owner and they changed their name, but wouldn't you know, there were still about a dozen wheeled shipping containers parked in the lot. Am I the jerk for refusing to participate in my boyfriend's family's Thanksgiving tradition? I went to Thanksgiving at my boyfriend's family's house last night. I had met his parents and sister a couple of times, but this was my first time meeting his more extended family. He said they make a whole day of it, so we would be heading over around 10 a.m. When we arrived, there were several men sitting in the living room watching football. My boyfriend introduced me to his brother, brother-in-law, uncles, and some cousins. His dad was also there. There's a cooler in the middle of the room, and my boyfriend grabs a beer and sits down to watch the game. His mom and sister come in to say hi, and his mom says, "Perfect timing. We are just getting going in the kitchen. Come on, let's get you a drink." I go into the kitchen, and there are several women in there. They have Christmas movies on the TV, and most of them are doing some kind of food prep. I grab my drink and go back and sit with my boyfriend. I try to strike up some conversation, but the guys were super into the game. After a while, I take my boyfriend to the side and tell him I feel awkward since I'm not into football and no one is really talking to me. He told me, "Then go hang out in the kitchen. The girls talk up a storm. The family tradition is for the guys to watch football and the ladies hang out in the kitchen and make the meal." I told him I found that extremely wrong and I was not interested in going into the kitchen while the men sat around drinking and watching TV. I ended up just sitting around awkwardly watching them all talk sports until basically dinner was served, at which point they got up, got a plate, and went back to watching TV. I told my boyfriend after that I was upset, and he said I was overreacting. I told him it was awkward as I didn't like sports, but I didn't want to be banished to the kitchen with the women. I told him I didn't really feel like I got to know next to nothing about his family, except that they have this messed up tradition. Am I the jerk? Remember this experience very, very well, because it's most definitely a glimpse of what your future will look like if you stay with your boyfriend. You told him how you felt. He invalidated your feelings and told you to grin and bear it. Is that what you want? Not only does he accept this type of alienation, he expects you to just cluck with the other chickens in the kitchen. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Your boyfriend is very much the jerk, though. His family are not, though, in this case. They were enjoying a tradition that they're comfortable with, despite how ick it might be to myself and to others. Your boyfriend invited you, and it was messed up that he pretty much ditched you to get to know only the women in the family. Honestly, I'm surprised you didn't leave. I would have noted out of there. Not the jerk.
I would have cringed so much if I was there. This is disgusting. And all those people trying to justify it and call OP the jerk need to learn a bit of empathy. Imagine being a guest and expected to relegate yourself to the kitchen while half the attendees just hang out doing something the other half are excluded from. Also, I'd love to see all those men who hang out attempt to prepare a dinner and watch the kids while the women sit around and watch their entertainment without lifting a finger. Everyone sucks here, except all those nice women you chose to ignore. Info: is this the first time you met these people? His mom and sister came in and said, "Hi," and his mom says, "Perfect timing, we're just going into the kitchen. Come on, let's get you a drink." While you are correct, this is a wrong tradition, and you don't have to like it. Mom and sister invited you to join them. They sounded happy to meet you. They were trying to include you. You chose not to interact with the women of his family. You're complaining that you didn't get to learn about anybody in the family, but had you gone with mom and sister and met all the other women, they'd have given you the lowdown on everybody. I agree it's a crappy tradition, but this might be deeply ingrained into your boyfriend. Talk to him and make some decision on whether this is something you can live with or if that's something he can live without. Not the jerk. My family is the complete opposite. All us ladies hang out in the living room watching the parades while the men get the food ready. The food would probably come out 10 times better if we were the ones making it, but at least we finally get a day off from our hectic schedules. When a tradition sucks, it's up to you to change it. I'd tell your boyfriend that you won't be going to another Thanksgiving with him next year unless they decide to alternate who does the food prep. It's not fair at all that they expected you to do it. Just a bunch of entitled man babies. You're the jerk. You decided not to be in the kitchen only because you thought it was wrong, even though all the women there weren't helping out with the cooking, but were watching Christmas movies, chatting and drinking instead of watching football, because like you, they don't want to. The men in fact didn't tell you you couldn't sit down and watch football. They just wanted to watch the game and not make small talk with you. Whine, whine, whine. I'll be darned if I'm gonna go in the kitchen because I'm not going to be relegated to that role. Gonna sit in the room where sports is dominant and then get on the internet and whine about not liking sports and not having a nice conversation. You had a couple of choices. You could have gone into the kitchen and made an effort, or you could have gone home. Nope, you get online and whine about it. You're the jerk. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her boyfriend? Please let us know. I think we should have standardized questionnaires that we fill out before dating someone. Lots of these types of things could really be avoided that way. Am I the jerk for crashing my wife's birthday party and taking her home? My wife turned 30 this week. I'm 26, male. We've always had a strong relationship and I love her so much. My wife has a best friend from childhood, Jimmy, who's 28. I didn't know him that well, but this year we've gotten to know each other and have gotten close. He's my best bud and like an older brother to me in a lot of ways. My wife goes all out for my birthday parties and I love them. She's more of a stoic introvert, so I thought it would be nice to throw her a surprise 30th birthday with just her and me and make it a special event. I wanted to make her a gift she would love. Jimmy's an incredible artist, and for the past 2 months, I've been taking lessons from him. My wife was curious why I was spending so much time away from home with Jimmy, but I made vague excuses because I couldn't tell her I was making a gift for her. She's made a couple comments, but never seemed upset. I told her a week before her birthday that I had made plans with Jimmy. I have a job with flexible hours, so it's not uncommon for me to do it. She wasn't upset or anything. When her birthday came, it was all I could do not to say anything. When she left for work, I put my plan in action. I decorated the place. I brought out the cake. I learned from YouTube and stored it at our friend's house. I got a dozen bouquets of flowers. I got her a few other gifts too. She was supposed to come home at 5:30, but she didn't. I waited hours for her, but she didn't come home. I called Jimmy, and he said he hadn't seen her either. I called her, and she didn't pick up. I checked her location, and she was at a restaurant. I went to the restaurant, and she was there with her friends. They were eating a birthday cake, and she had presents. I never met these friends of hers before. I think they're from her work. She seemed sad. She wasn't smiling or energetic. I wanted to take her home and show her my gift so that she would be happy. I came over to her and told her she had to come home. We grabbed her things and left. On the Uber back, she didn't say anything. At home, she started crying. She's been sleeping on the couch and she's avoiding me. My wife hasn't talked to Jimmy either. I told my mom and she called me a jerk. I don't know why. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk.
You didn't use the critical piece of surprise party planning here, where you have her at home at a certain time for a good reason. You just made it look like you were blowing her off, and she made other plans. You honestly just made it look like you remembered her birthday at the last minute and went overboard to try to make up for it. And instead of apologizing, you forced her to appreciate your thoughtfulness. Not to mention her work friends, who probably already thought OP was a jerk for not making plans for her birthday, so they take her out to cheer her up. And then OP tracks her location, hunts her down in a restaurant, and demands she leave with him in front of all of her friends. So now they thinking that he's a controlling jerk. Red flag. If I was her, I'd be ashamed and worried my friends were questioning if my husband was mistreating me. Not the jerk. Young man, you've learned a valuable lesson of being a husband. Never go above and beyond. She's just gonna find something to get mad about when you do. Keep it simple. That's what they like, because the truth is, they're simple people themselves. Back in '02, I bought my wife a new car with all the upgrades the dealership offered. What did I get in return? This sure looks complicated. Do we really need all this extra stuff? Few years later, I bought her a new washer and dryer. What did I get in return? This sure looks complicated. What was wrong with the old ones? This is so much harder to use than the old ones. Eventually, I learned to keep it simple, and ever since then, I've never had to deal with her being ungrateful over something I went above and beyond on again. If you're lucky enough to have a wife who actually appreciates the extra effort, consider yourself lucky, and let me know where you found her, because I've been looking to trade mine in for a long time. No, but seriously, let me know. God bless y'all and be safe out there. Hope y'all had a happy and safe Thanksgiving, and wishing you a Merry Christmas. He is the reason for the season. Bill. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know.
When will people learn that real life is never like the sitcoms? And again, half our viewers probably don't even remember what sitcoms were.
My table caused me to have an emotional breakdown and tried to get me fired because of a genuine misunderstanding. On Thanksgiving Day, the restaurant I work at was open for lunch. I had a family of 7 come in. At first, everything was fine, and I was making small talk, getting everyone's drinks. It was their 4 kids that were around my age, the grandpa and the dad and the wife. When the dad and the wife arrived, the dad immediately ordered 2 beers. The dad's face was very red and scarred looking, and he seemed upset and in pain. As I was walking away, I heard a man say that he had fallen and hurt himself. This is where I messed up. I assumed it was the dad who was hurt and genuinely wanted to help him. When I went back to the table and went up to him, I asked if he needed anything like water or ibuprofen or anything else that I could get him. He was immediately very angry and asked what I was talking about. I was very surprised and scared and stammered that I thought he was hurt or not feeling well and I wanted to help him. He then said, "Are you kidding me right now?" very angrily. The entire family was staring at us in stunned silence. His wife awkwardly made a joke that he had just gotten out of surgery for a shark attack. I apologized immediately and said I was not trying to offend him and I was very sorry. After that, the family ordered more drinks and talked. I made sure to take the best care of them and try to smooth things over. I got them multiple rounds of drinks. The dad had about 6 or 7. Entrees, to-go food, kept their water full, packed their food to go, and got them all desserts. At some point, the dad went to the bathroom and the grandpa asked why I offered his son ibuprofen. I explained I had heard someone had fallen and wanted to help. The grandpa told me that he was the one who had fallen and the dad was going through skin cancer treatment. His wife chimed in and told me that he was very insecure about it. I of course felt awful and tried to apologize and tell them I never wanted to offend him. Unfortunately, they just stared at me until I left the table. The kids who were my age were being friendly and I tried my best to smile and do what I could. At the end, the wife asked for the bill. It came out to $510. They put $540 in cash. I made the $30 in change and brought it back to the table. The last hour of work, I was trying so hard to not cry. They finally leave 40 minutes after we closed, and they had left the $30 as a tip. As I'm picking up their table, my boss comes over to me and asks why they were calling him, saying that I had offended them by offering the man pain medicine. Thank goodness my boss is a good guy and understood it was a misunderstanding, and they were being jerks about it. About 10 minutes later, when we were all about to leave for the day, they called my boss again. They told him to take the $30 tip back from me and that they wanted my boss to donate it to skin cancer research. I had already been crying at this point, but was just so shocked and humiliated. I gave him the $30 and I left. I spent the next hour in my car crying and disassociating. I felt so stupid and awful and hurt. I skipped out on Thanksgiving dinner with my boyfriend and his family because my eyes and face were so swollen and I felt very depressed and worthless. To that man and his family, I'm very sorry you are dealing with cancer and that I ruined your meal. Taking out that anger and pain on a service worker, trying their best on a holiday, and ruining their day as well was very wrong and uncalled for. I hope you remember this day and realize you were wrong for acting like that. I hope you can one day feel thankfulness and forgiveness instead of hate and malice. I'm so sorry they were terrible, and your boss shouldn't have even mentioned that they called, much less taken your tip back. However, you should never offer any kind of medicine to anyone, even if they ask for it. The liability here is huge. I only say this so you know for next time. Am I the jerk for confronting my cousin in front of the whole family for stealing from my house? I, late 30s male, hosted Thanksgiving at my house. My husband, 50s male, and I have a nephew who's 16 who stays with us part-time. He has a bedroom on the second floor and my bedroom is on the third floor. It's a suite with a sitting room, living room, 2 walk-in closets in the bedroom. When you walk up the stairs, you walk into the sitting room, then there's a small living room, then the bedroom, and then you go into either one of the closets from the bedroom. I have a nephew who is 5 and is exhibiting signs of autism. His mother, 27 female, is my second cousin. She came along with her 2 brothers and their mother, so everyone's taking turns entertaining my 5-year-old nephew because he requires a little bit of extra attention. At one point, I leave the living room on the first floor and I see him on the stairs, playing with a toy car and what looks like a watch. I look closer and I see the watch belongs to my husband, and it's a pretty expensive watch to be smashing into a toy car. I asked my nephew where he got it, and he said Uncle's, 29, male, backpack. I asked him if he could show me. He leads me to the piano room where everyone put their jackets and whatnot, and my one cousin's backpack. My nephew opens the front portion of the backpack and I see some other jewelry in there. I was really upset, so I grabbed his backpack and grabbed my nephew and went into the living room. I dumped the backpack out onto one of the coffee tables and asked my cousin what the heck was going on with the fact that 2 of my husband's watches and a necklace that belonged to my mother were in his bag. I dumped out the bag, and the nephew who lives with me, his Switch was in there. The cousin whose backpack it was freaked out, saying clearly my autistic nephew put stuff in there that he had taken from upstairs. I know that's not the case because he's not tall enough to get to the dresser where the jewelry was, nor do I think he would even wander that far away from everyone else. Am I the jerk for confronting him in front of everyone? Edit 1. Cut some things out for the character limit. So when I dumped the bag out, the cousin who stole the stuff was white as a sheet. His sister later asked me how on earth I would do that in front of everyone. The man who stole from me, his mother said that what he did was wrong, but I don't need to point it out to everyone because everyone's going to be looking at him when he comes over to their house. That's why I'm wondering if I'm the jerk. For those asking, I don't think he's an addict, but in all fairness, I didn't think he was a thief either. I don't think he's a career criminal because he didn't take the expensive watches, just the mid-grade ones. The necklace also was just gold-plated, so probably only worth $100 or $200. The point is, there were much more expensive things he could have taken out of the drawers he was in. I'm second cousins with the thief's mother. I'm just Uncle OP to the little guy because it's a lot easier than second cousin twice removed OP. Am I the jerk for not getting McDonald's for my friend's kid? Yesterday, my friend Ryan had to work. I was off work, so he asked if I'd mind watching his kids for the day since they have this week off school. Now, for the most part, his kids, Andy, who's 10, and Mary, who's 7, are good kids, and I've hung out with them all before. So I said sure. I was told by Ryan that Andy will only eat chicken tenders, mac and cheese, hot dogs, and peanut butter and jelly. We watched some movies, played Wii, and I took them out to eat for lunch. Then Andy, who's 10, kept telling me, "We need to go to McDonald's to get my tenders." I said that the restaurant we were going to had really good chicken tenders. They do. Besides, I didn't want to be one of those people that brings outside food to a restaurant. Well, we get to the restaurant, and Andy keeps saying that he doesn't want to eat there. He wants McDonald's. Long story short, Mary had a burger and ate it all. I ordered Andy some tenders, and he refused to try them. So I took the leftovers with us to give to Ryan. When Ryan picked them up later, Andy told him that he was hungry and hadn't eaten since before lunch. We had some snacks. Ryan asked me why I didn't feed them lunch. I said I took them out to eat, and Mary said, "Yup, I had a burger." Andy told him that he didn't like the tenders at that restaurant, so didn't eat them, and I wouldn't get him McDonald's, so he didn't eat lunch. Ryan said he told me Andy is a picky eater and I should have just gotten McDonald's for him instead of forcing him to starve. I shouldn't be trying to force his kid to eat stuff. On one hand, I see Ryan's point, but at the same time, he can't honestly expect people to drive all over getting different food or have to eat McDonald's whenever they watch his kids. Am I the jerk? ETA, since multiple people have said I should have made him a PB&J. I couldn't make him a PB&J. Well, I technically could, but earlier in the day I offered to make him PB&J for a snack, but he only likes grape jelly, and I had strawberry. I don't have mac and cheese because I'm lactose intolerant. You're the jerk. It really sounds like this kid may have some sort of disability. All 8 of my babies have struggled with disabilities, and one thing I've learned over the years is that when your child literally needs a certain specific food, you as a parent need to get it for them as they depend on you. There were times where I was literally attacked for not having the right chicken nuggets for my babies, but eventually I learned that it wasn't their fault. They weren't able to control themselves. It is true that 4 of them have been taken from me, but I still have my other 4, and when they need certain specific foods, Mama does whatever she needs to do to get it for them. I'm not ashamed of the things I've had to do to put Wendy's on the table. You try being a single mom with 8 kids and deadbeat fathers who refuse to support you because they think you're crazy and the courts won't do anything. Please don't take to heart everyone here acting like they know it all about parenting. Most of them probably don't even have kids themselves. I know I'm a good mom, and I always give it my all. I will get my babies back. Mark my words. Am I the jerk for calling my mom to come pick me up early at a party? A few weeks ago, I, 17 female, along with my friend, Martiza, 17 female, went to a Halloween party. We both got the jab, so we were all good there. On the way there, Martiza informed me that she had changed her mind about leaving the party at our agreed time and was more than likely going to spend the night and just skip class the next day. She told me this as we were in her car. I was going to be the designated driver on the way back. I would have been fine with this if she hadn't waited to tell me the unilateral change of plans 5 minutes before we pulled up to the house, so I was already a little peeved when we went into the party. I knew I was either going to have to pay $121 Halloween rates to get home or call my mom and have her come pick me up. I chose my mom. 1, because I knew she would be upset if I paid over $100 for a 45-minute car ride, and 2, my parents have always made it very clear to me that I can call them whenever I need them and they won't hold it against me. Anyways, we got to the party around 8:30, but around 9, a lot more people started coming in. Some I recognized because I do dual enrollment at my community college. Unfortunately, one of the people that came in was someone I had French with. I tried avoiding him, but he saw me anyway and proceeded to follow me around the party. Martiza had disappeared off the face of the planet like 2 minutes after we stepped foot into the door, so I was all alone. Mark is 24. I have no interest in him. He's 24, which is pretty gross and old in my opinion. I don't want to date someone 7 years older than me. I'm also only into other girls, so yeah, I've told him this multiple times, but he doesn't care. I get away from Mark, and around 9:30 I call my mom and ask her to come pick me up. I explain to her what's going on. I leave out Mark on purpose. I text Martiza and tell her that I'm leaving. She doesn't respond, so I go looking for her. I spend like 40 minutes looking because I started on the top floor, but she was in the kitchen doing shots and says whatever when I tell her I'm heading out. I go wait outside, and Mark manages to find me while I'm waiting. I keep trying to walk away from him, but he continues to follow me. I see my mom's car pulling up at this point. She must have recognized my costume because she got from the end of the driveway, out the car, and pulled Mark by his collar away from me in like 2 seconds. Lo and behold, Martiza's mom is also there because Martiza had told her she was spending the night at my house. I did not know she lied. Her mom goes inside and starts yelling her name looking for her. Martiza comes out with her mom looking mortified. I'm already in the car with my mom. They leave in Martiza's car. So now Martiza is punished and had her phone and car taken away. She can only talk to people in school. She's mad at me and blames me for snitching. She's also upset that I didn't get punished and still have my privileges. When she talks to me, she's really passive-aggressive. She ignores me a lot too. So, am I the jerk?
My Karen girlfriend refuses to cook extra breakfast for me.
I, 27 male, have been living with my girlfriend, who's 29 female, for several months now. For the most part, things are really good, and I plan to propose soon and hopefully have at least a couple of kids with her. However, we've run up against a conflict. She's an absolute morning person. I hate mornings. By the time I force myself out of bed in the morning and into the shower, she's already been up for at least 30 minutes, even though she has to be at work later than I do, and is at the stove making breakfast. She likes to make a huge breakfast in the morning. She usually has eggs, either French toast or pancakes, hash browns or breakfast potatoes, and sausage or bacon. Sometimes on weekends it's ham or steak. She eats almost nothing for lunch and usually has a small dinner, but she loves a huge breakfast. Meanwhile, I only ever have cold cereal for breakfast, or maybe if I'm feeling really ambitious, some instant oatmeal and orange juice. I only even start to come alive halfway through my second cup of coffee and definitely don't feel like cooking in the morning. However, my girlfriend obviously does. So recently, I asked her if she'd start making breakfast for me too. She asked if we were going to trade off and if I'd sometimes make breakfast for her too. I told her no, but reminded her that I do often make dinner for her. She said that since we trade off making dinner, we should trade off making breakfast too. I told her that there's no way I'll ever be able to muster that kind of energy first thing in the morning, but that since she obviously can, that she should just make me breakfast too. I said that it would take next to no extra effort on her part to throw in a couple more eggs, strips of bacon, an extra portion of hash browns, etc., since she's already doing it for herself anyway. But it started a fight, with her saying that it wasn't fair for me to expect her to think of me in the morning since I don't do the same for her. She seems to think that her making breakfast for me should figure into our division of labor and that I should do something extra in return. But I think that since she makes a huge breakfast for herself every morning anyway, that throwing an extra portion of whatever she's making on for me would take next to no effort on her part. So why should I have to do more for her in return than I already do?
You're the jerk.
Oh, so we'll take turns making breakfast for each other?
No, you'll just make food for me. It's no extra effort for you anyways. The cheek on you. Dude should have offered to make dinner every night in exchange for breakfast every morning from her. The only way I could see this as not the jerk is if OP was down to make dinner as often, or in my personal opinion, more often, as the girlfriend makes breakfast. Come on, OP. Obviously, you're aware of the energy required to do things like make breakfast in the morning, so you should be at least willing to reciprocate later in the day. I'd be tucking her in, kissing her goodnight, and reading her a bedtime story if I could wake up to bacon and eggs some mornings.
You're talking about proposing and having kids? Will she never get a morning off from the kids because you hate mornings? She's already up, so she should be the one to pack bags and lunches and cook everyone's breakfast? She's naturally feeding, so you never need to cover the night wake-ups. She's home earlier often, and that's the person who starts dinner and picks up the kids and deals with the homework, but you're totally doing 50-50. She's washing her clothes anyway, so it's no extra effort to put yours in, then fold them and put them away because she's doing that for the rest of the load, right? It sounds like she already feels like she's doing more, and now you're asking for something else. If it would require effort and energy for you to do it, it requires effort and energy for her to do it. This may be a small amount of additional energy for this one thing, but it makes me wonder if she's already feeling that she's putting out significantly more effort for household duties as it stands. Oh, and you're the jerk. Dude's girlfriend gets up early and makes herself a big breakfast every day. He asks her to make a little extra for him, and she flips out and refuses to do it. You're the jerk for staying with someone who treats you like this. There are actually women out there who would be happy to put a few extra eggs on in the morning so you can have something to eat too. But you definitely won't find them here on Reddit. Best part is, imagine if the roles were flipped. My husband gets up early and makes a huge breakfast just for himself every morning. I asked if he'd be willing to make a little extra for me, and he refuses to do it. All of you hypocrites would be telling her to divorce him and that she deserves better. Then you'd have the pathetic thirsty dudes commenting how they wish they could cook her breakfast since her boyfriend doesn't. They always pop up somewhere. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know.
It breaks my heart how transactional relationships have become.
Want revenge by paying in pennies? Here, let me count these for you. Ages ago, I worked a frontline job at City Hall, registering cars and dogs and collecting money for parking tickets, property taxes, and the like. So, a basic entry-level municipal finance grunt, bottom of the food chain, nowhere close to being the one making the ordinances or rules, just a grunt. This was before the days of taking credit cards and debit cards for such payments, before smartphones, before the online banking world really began. Ages ago. Paper, paper, paper. The city's ordinance on tax interest stated that interest would accrue daily against any past due tax bill at a rate of blah blah blah. Property taxes were due quarterly. Many people would come in to pay cash on the tax due date. Many, many more would remit their payments by checks through the mail. We kept extremely thorough paper records of all payments received through the mail, retaining their remittance stub, the envelope bearing the postmark, which was the date we would use to calculate any interest if it arrived past the due date. If the postmark was before or on the due date, no interest was charged. These were batched daily by each clerk, filed by date in our vault, so anyone who needed to could find any receipt or remittance fairly quickly. We needed to, often, as did the city auditor. Anyway, business as usual, and the few days following the tax due, we would always get a few stragglers through the mail, and the daily interest would have started adding up. Not by a lot. For most homeowners, this would only amount to just a few cents a day. We would send them a receipt in the mail with a note that they have a small balance now due to accrued interest, but we would hold it at the amount for 10 days. Most people would just send another check, some would ignore it, and others would come to pay it in person. Finally, the stars aligned and I got one. A real jerk of a gentleman who was extremely disgruntled that he got a bill in the mail for this horrible interest BS, which he slapped down on the counter inches away from me. He then slammed a repurposed melatonin bottle full of pennies down on top of the paper and said, "I hope whoever sent me this bill has to count these pennies," at top volume for all of the city hall to hear. I could tell already that it was mine. I saw my initials on the receipt when he slapped it down. Cue malicious compliance. I smiled as big as I could, said I would find out who had processed it, and took his receipt to the vault. I didn't even give him enough time to react. I just got up and went to the vault while cheerfully saying, "It'll just be a minute," before disappearing from his sight. I found the paperwork, including his 2 days late postmarked envelope. Then I sat down at my desk, took the melatonin bottle, looked him in the eye and said, "You're in luck today, sir. I'm the one who sent this balance due to you, so I will be able to count these pennies for you." And I did. I counted all 39 of those pennies, and I counted them one by one, very, very thoroughly. It took him about 20 minutes to pay his 39 cents from the minute that bottle hit the counter to the end of it. I was extremely pleasant and cordial and smiling at him the entire time. It was just fun at that point, so I kept pouring it on. Just so sweet. His face was practically purple by the end, and as he slunk out the door, without the smug satisfaction he was expecting when he slammed that bottle on my counter, I said, "Have a great rest of your day. Weather's beautiful." And it was. Grumpy church group seems confused about what my job is. A local church rented a few adjoining rooms for like a week or so for their pastor or other church officials. I'm not sure what their business is, but they seem like they're busy with meetings, etc. There are always people coming and going, and they like to congregate in our breakfast area by the lounge. They make coffee and bring snacks and refreshments or whatever, and meet for a few hours or so. This hasn't been an issue, and we haven't been particularly busy. But as the holiday approaches, we steadily get more and more busy. They're not rude per se, but they aren't exactly pleasant either. They asked me a number of times for plates, cutlery, etc. that I provided from our stores, and after the third time or so, I told them that our supplies are running low, so I can only provide so much. They gave me a look like they were thinking, "What kind of place is this?" and took what I offered. Sometimes they don't completely clean up after themselves either, which is annoying. A few times they asked me to ask other guests to leave their meeting area because they were disturbing them. I informed them that other guests are free to use our public spaces as they like. I didn't want to sound rude, but I suggested if they held their meetings in their rooms, no one would disturb them there. More, "What kind of rat hole place is this?" stares. We sold out fairly early yesterday, and I was running through the bucket checking info and helping guests' phone calls, etc. when one of the church members came to the desk looking grumpier than usual. He was glaring at me with a sour bulldog face as I was hanging up with a guest. I braced and internally prepared for whatever this was going to be. He asked me what I was doing. I said, helping guests at the moment, but what can I do for you? Bulldog. When you were doing whatever you were doing, people have been eating our cupcakes from our meeting area. They were meant for later. Me. I'm sorry, sir. What meeting area? He points to the breakfast area. Me. I apologize, sir, but that's our breakfast area, which is open to all of the guests. If food is left there unattended, we're not responsible for whatever happens to it. Bulldog. So, what should we do then? I'm thinking to myself, I don't know, keep it in one of your rooms until you're ready for your meeting maybe? Bulldog. I saw some dirty-looking kid grab one. Now we have to throw the rest out. And there are people drinking at the bar, being loud, causing a disturbance. He went on for a bit, I guess fully expecting me to clear out the area so they can have their meeting in their meeting area. I just repeated, it's a public space. We're not responsible for whatever they leave out. My job is to attend to guests, and I can't police their cupcakes or whatever. I didn't say it like that, but I made my point. He, at least, expected full compensation for the cupcakes, and I said I can't clear that because they chose to leave their stuff in a public area, and that isn't our responsibility at all. He got my name and my manager's cards and he left. He didn't do anything about the cupcakes, and he didn't say if they were going to meet there or not, so I just left it. Near the end of my shift, no one from the church had been by, and the cupcakes were still there, so I just threw them away. They're only here through Saturday, thank God, and I'm off tomorrow, so I don't have to see them. Praise. Am I the jerk for refusing to give up my seat and being crass about it? I, 36 female, flew home for Thanksgiving this week and got an early flight this morning so I would be able to do laundry tomorrow and relax before going back to work. I'm a plus-size woman. The cause was finally diagnosed after 3 years of weight gain. I've lost 4 pounds in the last 4 weeks. So when I booked my flights, I spent extra money and booked 2 adjacent seats, so whoever had the 3rd seat in my row would not have to be squished up in my business. Flying out was great. The other person in my row was cool, and we shared the middle seat and snacks and played Pokemon on our Switches and visited each other's Animal Crossing islands. Flying home was where things became a bit more problematic. I was settled into my pair of seats, and the gentleman tried to seat his daughter, who was around 12, in the middle seat, where I was taking up a good third of it. I said politely, "I'm sorry, that seat is booked. Your daughter can't sit there," while putting my hand on the other 2/3 of the seat. He immediately complained that he hadn't been able to book seats together and he needed to sit with his daughter. I shrugged and said I was sorry, but it wasn't my problem. This wasn't his seat. He called over a stewardess to complain. I explained my situation and showed my pair of tickets, and the flight attendant offered to comp my extra seat. I said no thank you, I needed the extra room, and waved to where I was partway into the middle seat. The stewardess came back 10 minutes later with a wife from a couple who agreed to switch seats so that the man could sit with his daughter. But not without attempting to shame me for not willing to help out a dad in need and commenting about how selfish I was. Edit. The woman who switched seats was rude, not the stewardess. The stewardess was nothing but polite. I said, I booked early, and I booked 2 seats together because, to put it plainly, I'm big. The woman turned red in the face and complained to me for being disgusting. I replied that his lack of planning was not my emergency, and she scowled at me for the entire rest of the flight. When I told my folks about it after I landed, my dad thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard, but my mom yelled at him and said that I should have been more willing to help out a dad with a kid when I had 2 seats. So I want to know, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. These airplane issues are getting out of hand. It's very simple. You book a seat, you are entitled to it. People can ask you to change, but if you say no, that's it. End of story. I don't understand why people find this basic rule to be so hard to comprehend. Not the jerk. First of all, congrats on the diagnosis and the weight loss. That must be such an unbelievable relief to have answers and finally see some progress after struggling for 3 years. Second of all, you planned ahead, and while it isn't always possible for everyone to do, such as last-minute changes at work, you put forth the effort so that you would not be an inconvenience to anyone else due to your current body type. And you spent a lot of extra money to do so, I'm sure several $100s overall. He asked, and even though you were offered reimbursement, you declined, as is your right. And it sounds as though he would have been just as happy to take your extra seat without asking and without the flight seeing you reimbursed if you hadn't had the courage to speak up for yourself. Congrats on standing up for yourself and taking care of your needs. Am I the jerk for crashing my roommate's car and then wanting to use her insurance instead of paying out of pocket? I rear-ended my roommate's car last week at a stop sign. It was a pretty minor accident. I was going about 10 miles an hour, and it was just a slight bump. Anyways, we got it checked out, and there's $2,000 worth of damages to fix her car, and $1,000 for the guy I hit. I wanted to use my full coverage insurance, but they wouldn't let me as I got into the crash with a car that was not mine. I proposed to my roommate that we use her full coverage insurance, as that's what insurance is for, and she pays about $400 a month for it, and I'll cover any and all premium costs of the insurance as well as the $500 copayment requirement. My roommate doesn't agree to this deal. She proposed two things. One, we use her insurance, I pay the premium cost, the copayment requirement, and the value of how much her car went down in the market because using her insurance will show up in the Carfax when she sells it. I asked her how will she know how much the car value depreciated, and she said when she sells the car next year, she'll ask the dealer how much her car value decreased due to the accident. I can't agree to this arrangement for a couple reasons. Firstly, I don't trust the dealer. Wouldn't they just exaggerate the amount the car value went down to get the car for cheaper? And secondly, as I can't play any role in talking to the dealer or selling the car, I'm essentially signing a blank check to pay however much she or the dealer deems the car went down next year. This is too risky. What if she insists it's like $5,000 next year? I'll have already agreed to pay the decreased car value for using her insurance. I also talked to my parents, and they said that car values don't depreciate for getting into minor accidents like this one, just major ones, especially if the car was 100% fixed up. But there's nothing I can say to convince her that using her insurance won't lead to a substantial decrease in value of her car due to the accident being recorded in the Carfax. 2. The second option, if I don't agree to this deal, is to pay for everything out of pocket and not get her insurance involved. This would be like almost an entire month's salary for me. It's insanely expensive, and I don't want to pay out of pocket when my roommate pays $400 a month for car insurance. In my opinion, insurance is exactly for moments like this, and I'm really sorry that I can't use mine, but I'm willing to pay the premium on hers. Her argument is that I have the audacity to negotiate or argue with her when I crashed her car, and I should be apologetic and agree to handle things the way she wants to handle it. Anyways, am I the jerk for refusing to either of her two options and continually trying to negotiate for using her insurance without the car value decrease stipulations? You're the jerk. You used her car, you follow her rules. Amazing, people don't understand this. You crash someone else's car and you have no say in how the owners want it to be handled. Sorry, but no. Don't loan your car out if you're not willing to deal with someone else's mess up. She's willing to pay for the damages and any increases in insurance. Unfortunately, OP's roommate just can't blindly ask for thousands of dollars for hypothetical damages on a small rear-end accident. At some point, you need to be realistic about the fact that lending people cars comes with a risk. Don't do it if you don't trust the person, and don't do it if you're unwilling to get totally done over. Quite frankly, OP would be totally in her right to say, oops, and let roommate take her to court and only get the $500 deductible maybe. ETA. People need to understand what liability means. It means you're taking responsibility and ownership of whatever happens in that car. Just like with homeowners insurance, you're responsible if someone gets hurt on your property, even if it's kids playing in your yard that aren't yours. OP's roommate wants to suffer absolutely no consequences of OP's actions, and while I get it, that's not how liability works. She needs to very quickly understand just how serious the concept is. If roommate is so concerned about the depreciation on their car and insurance companies supposedly pay for depreciation, then the solution is abundantly clear. Use the insurance. OP pays the deductible and increased premiums, and roommate then asks for lost value. You're the jerk. You damaged her car. You don't get to decide what is easiest and most convenient for you. If she doesn't want to go through insurance, you need to pay up. Insurance rates go up after an accident. It's one thing to pay up the increase when it's your own fault, but she shouldn't have to deal with the increased insurance for doing you a favor and loaning her car to you. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her roommate? Please let us know.
And this is why you don't let anyone borrow your car.
Am I the jerk for telling my brother's girlfriend that Christmas isn't the meal to be cheap? I, 47 male, spend Christmas with my parents. My dad passed earlier this year, so my brother, who's 40, and his girlfriend, who's 32, I'll refer to her as Eve, have said that they will cook on Christmas. Eve is the cook. It's their first Christmas with their infant son, so they're very excited for it. When I was visiting my brother and Eve, they were talking excitedly about Christmas. This will be the first time Eve has cooked for Christmas, and the first time she has ever cooked a turkey. Brother said they had already bought the turkey. I frowned, as we had always had a fresh turkey from the local butchers, never a frozen turkey. Eve said that she had gotten a frozen turkey crown as it was cheaper and that they didn't need a large turkey with legs. She started talking through her plan, saying she had already bought turkey gravy mix as she didn't want to cook gravy from scratch, using tinned potatoes to make the roast potatoes, had already made stuffing balls and that they're in the freezer. I know that she's struggling for money at the moment as she is on maternity leave and is not returning to her job as nephew has additional needs. I was appalled when she said that she was going to cook Christmas dinner at their house the day before and then bring it to Mom's to heat it up. Mom is unable to do stairs, so we have to go to her. Eve tried explaining that due to the cost of living going up, she didn't want Mom to have the additional cost of cooking a Christmas dinner. They're having their own meal on the 24th, so Eve is cooking 2 dinners at once. I snapped at Eve. I told her that I know that she's being frugal with not going back to work, but that Christmas dinner wasn't the meal for her to be cheap on, especially Mom's first Christmas after her husband has passed. I told Eve that if she wasn't prepared to make a fresh meal that wasn't full of frozen food that God knows how old it is, then she shouldn't have offered to cook on Christmas. Eve then left the room with nephew, saying she needed to go feed him. My brother got annoyed with me, telling me that I was being rude. He said that he was the one paying for the Christmas meal. They had bought the turkey before Dad passed and had only gotten one big enough to feed them with leftovers. He had been the one that suggested including Mom and I for Christmas to Eve. Eve had been making things like stuffing balls and her homemade pigs in a blanket in advance, and using tinned potatoes was to make her life easier. He argued that Eve is the primary caretaker for nephew, so she takes shortcuts when she is home alone with nephew so that she can focus on him. Mom has called me and had a go at me for making Eve cry, especially when I know that she's stressed from looking after nephew. Apparently, she had taken nephew to go and cry upstairs, but I had no idea. I do feel bad that she got upset, but at the same time, I don't think Christmas is the one meal to be cheap on. Am I the jerk? Edit. I have always and will be supplying the dessert and making a dairy-free one for Eve. Me making the dessert was the agreement I had with my parents. They aren't actually struggling. They can and do live comfortably on my brother's wage. We work in the same field and are paid well. They chose to live well below their means. Okay, I'm the jerk. I will call my brother in the morning and apologize and see if I can come around to apologize to Eve in person, and I will offer to help her cook if she wants. I'm not going to turn up uninvited if Eve doesn't want to see me. I don't want to upset her more. She's a sweet girl and well suited with my brother. Edit. So this blew up way more than expected. By saying Eve is well suited to my brother, I just meant they balance each other very nicely. They're a lovely couple, and she has had such a positive influence on him. I have since spoken to my brother and Eve as he put the phone on speaker, and she was there. Turns out I didn't make her cry. Brother had told Mom I had upset her with my comments, but made no mention of Eve crying. Eve said that she didn't cry, she was just upset, but took nephew as she thought she would cry. She had been considering tinned potatoes and had mentioned them to me to see how they would go down with Mom and myself. Eve said she's going to make some roast potatoes and has asked if I would help her with the prep as brother is working during the day on Christmas Eve. I've told her that I will help her with the prep on Christmas Eve and that I would also take her and nephew out for lunch that day. I will also be buying another turkey crown that I will cook so that Eve has leftovers to make Christmas dinner pies, which had been her initial plan with the turkey before they offered to cook for the 4 of us. I apologized to her, which she accepted. I'm going to cook next year. You're the jerk. You're doing nothing to contribute, so you have no say in how they cook what is essentially a free meal for you. Get over yourself. You're the jerk. Do you know how much these meals cost? I just spent nearly $200 for my family of 4. If you want a fresh turkey, go buy it. Holy cow, someone is cooking and preparing this meal for you, and this is how you act? Oh, and apparently this poor woman who is paying for your dinner that she is cooking is also preparing another meal for her parents, just had a baby, and is also taking care of her special needs nephew? You know, instead of complaining, maybe you could act like a grown man and help her out. Everyone sucks here. I can't imagine feeding people 1-month-old frozen food for Christmas. Not the jerk. Cooking for holidays is a huge to-do, and if you aren't properly prepared for it, it's not worth it. Frozen turkey isn't a big deal, neither is pre-made gravy, but canned and row-made potatoes is a bit much. Pitch in an additional $200 to $300 so things can be done right. Not the jerk. But honestly, I just have food aversions and old food disgusts me. This meal sounds vile. I can see I'm in the minority here. Look, I wouldn't eat food that was a month old, but I wouldn't have been so rude to Eve. I would have talked to my brother and said, "Hey, I'm concerned that the meal won't be edible for mom and may be unsafe." Then you should have offered to make dinner yourself and shoulder the cost. If you aren't prepared to do that, then you're the jerk. Sell me your house. A couple of years ago, my husband and I bought a house from the city council. We had seen it and we loved everything about it and the neighborhood. Inspection showed that apart from the central heating boiler, everything was in good order. We still needed to replace the central heater boiler. We also renovated the bathroom and upstairs, and we placed a new kitchen. Between then and now, we have invested money in our home. Amongst other things, we placed solar panels, renovated the front and back garden, and renovated our downstairs toilet. For reference, we have lived here for around 6 years now, and we have no intention on moving. Apart from the fact that we pumped a lot of money in the house, we love the neighborhood, our neighbors, and the fact that we are close to family and friends. The way the council sold houses went as follows. The house was up for sale for 6 weeks. If you were interested, you could schedule a visit with a real estate agent, place a bid if you wanted, and then after the 6 weeks, the city council would look at all the bids and see who offered the most. 2 weeks ago, I was home when a lady rang the doorbell. She introduced herself and told me that when the house came up for sale all those years ago, she and her husband were interested. They could see the potential, but their bid was rejected. She was enthused about how it looked now, from what she could see, and how beautiful the garden was, how wonderful the solar panels were and such. So I thanked her for her compliments and waited for the reason why she rang the doorbell. She told me that since they had more money saved now, she and her husband wanted to know if we were interested in selling them the house. I told her that we were not interested. She started whining and gave an offer, and I told her the same, not interested at all. More whining ensued, and she made a new offer. I kindly drew the line and said that she can offer all she wants. We love living here, and we want to enjoy our home with the family we've built in it. Then I told her that I had things to do, wished her a good day, and closed the door. I had barely turned around when she started ringing the doorbell continuously, so I opened the door and asked her what she needed to say. She told me this, almost verbatim. "You need to sell us this house. You have lived here for some years now. My husband and kids deserve a nice house like this. I gave you 2 offers that are very reasonable. It's our turn now, so sell us the house. We want to live here." I told this woman that her offers were laughable. She gave 2 offers, while we knew that we could ask for double the price and get that still. She lowballed. I reiterated that we were not interested and would not sell the house. I asked her to leave and close the door again. Then she started ringing the doorbell like a madwoman. After trying to ignore it, I ripped open the front door and shouted in her face for her to get lost. We are not interested. Even if we were, I would not sell my house to her since she's acting like a spoiled brat. I wouldn't want my neighbors to deal with her spoiled attitude. I told her that she doesn't need to think about trying to bully us into moving and to get away, or I would call the police. This time I slammed the door to get the message across. She stayed, screaming at the door that we have to sell the house to her, and walked around a bit before leaving. I did send a message in our Streets group app about her. People have said to keep an eye out for her. My husband was stunned when I told him this, as this is not a normal thing in our country to do. She has been seen once or twice, but has not caused any more problems for us or anyone else. Karen took my credit card while I was asleep. I, 27, male, have been with my girlfriend, 24, female, for 7 months. We don't live together, and she has sleepovers at my place regularly. 2 days ago, she spent the night at my place And in the morning, while I was sleeping in, she got up, got dressed, took my credit card, and went grocery shopping with it. I woke up to a massive breakfast made by her as a surprise, and when I asked her how she got the money and time to prepare all that, she told me she took my credit card while I was asleep and headed to the supermarket to get the stuff she needed to make me a surprise breakfast. I was stunned. I asked why she didn't ask before taking my credit card, and she said I was sleeping and she didn't want to bother me. Besides that, she wanted this to be a surprise. I just stared and said, "I don't know. You do realize you technically stole from me when you took my credit card and went shopping with it without my consent, right?" She looked at me in complete shock and confusion and said that she was just trying to do something nice for me, and I just implied that she was a thief. I just shrugged and said it was technically true. She was so upset, she got up and stormed out of the kitchen crying. She collected her stuff and left after she said she spent time and effort to prepare me breakfast, and I was out of line to say she stole from me just because she forgot her wallet at home. She kept hanging up when I tried calling her and later sent me money for the stuff she bought, although she didn't take anything with her. My sister came over, and when I told her, she called me an ungrateful jerk with no manners to react this way after this display of affection by my girlfriend. She suggested I get over myself and apologize as soon as possible, but I decided to take my time. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. I would give anything to have a girlfriend who would do something like that for me. Not only did she sleep over, but the next day she gets up early and goes to buy groceries to make you breakfast. I will never understand why girls choose jerks like you instead of the nice guys like me. Oh yeah, it's because I'm not 6'4" and don't have a six-pack. I also don't have tattoos, and I treat them with respect. In return, I am despised by them. It honestly serves her right to be with an ungrateful jerk like you.
R/nice guys for the win.
Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard.
Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.